multi-streaming.
Okay. Are we still there?
Yes, I can still hear you.
No guarantee this is going to be better, but it's the opposite direction. Let's see.
Wow.
Well, I always set up in my basement, so come to me. Let's see. This is the opposite. I guess in your analogy, Jesus has left me in this case.
Yes.
Oh, come on, buddy. So, how many debates have you done?
I think I have 500 and something videos on my YouTube channel right now, so around that.
Okay, because probably everything you do, you put on your channel.
Yeah. It's okay. That works. That's fine. Good enough.
Fantastic.
All right. Looks like we are live. Benjamin, thanks for coming on. Appreciate you taking the time to have a conversation with me. Would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself before we get started?
Sure. I don't have a very good lighting setup, so I'm currently sitting halfway in the dark. So bear with me. I am, I guess for the purposes of this conversation, I'm a creationist. I lean certainly towards young earth creationism. I am a non-denominational Christian, so I don't claim to Methodist or Baptist doctrine particularly. And anything that I discuss, I typically come at it from not a pure presuppositional view, because I do think we need to be a little bit open to discussion. But I certainly lean that way, because from my perspective, if we're going to take God out of the discussion, then it makes certain things a lot less reasonable. So by keeping him in the discussion, it makes sense, because if he is reality, if he holds reality in his hand that we know of, then it would make sense that he's interacting with it and he's part of it. So taking him out of it would make it a lot less coherent. And then I guess from a professional background, I do building automation, a little bit of programming, a little bit of graphics, work with industrial equipment, work in hospitals, labs, different areas like that. And then from a ministry standpoint, I help in youth ministry at our church, and I am on a board for a summer camp. So I kind of help with programming for that summer camp. And I think that probably sums me up pretty good for this discussion. What do you think?
Cool. I'm an atheist, which means I believe that naturalism best explains everything about the universe. I don't think there's any evidence of a God. Could you tell me some of the reasons that you think creationism is supported? And I'll tell you my reasons, what I think about those, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on my position. Oh, by the way, we have like 6 comments that someone with hair this good could not be wrong.
Well, I'll surprise you. Watch me be wrong. So regarding, I cannot hand you a piece of empirical evidence that's going to say, well, here's creationism, boom. Such as, take the young earth argument, for example. I don't think there's empirical evidence in the sense of, like relating to gravity. We can drop something falls. We have a theory for that called gravity. That's how we explain what we're seeing. That's empirical, it's happening. But as far as explaining the age of the earth, we run into some difficulties in that discussion with what we can actually tangibly hold and do. So I think regarding evidence for God, I would say that existence is evidence. Everything is evidence. Kind of a picture that I paint is, if creation and existence is the event horizon for God. So everything points to him. If you take little bits and pieces, you might say, oh, well, that's just a little spurt of light, or that doesn't really look like much. But when you start connecting all of the dots, all of it points in one central direction. Just like around a black hole, you'd have a event horizon that you can't actually see that black hole with your eyes, but you can see everything going on around it that's pointing to it, quote unquote. So no analogy is perfect, but I think that would be a way that I'd kind of sum that up quickly.
Okay, what things point to a god as opposed to natural explanations?
Morality.
Okay, why would morality point to a god?
Well, as you know, there has to be, well, for my position, there has to be something outside of us that's showing us what right and wrong is. Otherwise, it's just all subjective and open to interpretation.
I agree there has to be an objective source, but why would that have to be a god? It could just be some part of nature we haven't discovered yet.
Coming at it from my view, though, creation is it's or nature. Did you say nature? I assume you said nature. Nature would probably be interchangeable with my word for creation. Everything that God's created, which encompasses the cosmos, Earth, us, individuals, personalities, minds, outside of himself, obviously. That creation can't create itself, and something can't dictate itself from outside of itself. God is outside of space, time, matter. So
Well,
he's not
it
bound by
seems.
us.
Sorry to interrupt, but it seems like you're going into a separate argument here. So that seems to be more like the cosmological argument. But I was just from the morality standpoint. Why would a god require? Why would you need a god for morality? It seems like morality could be a law of nature or something in nature. Why would you need a god?
Well, for it to be objective, there has to be an objective standard for morality, unless you want to argue subjective morality. But
Well, no, I
and I
agree.
believe you do too. Yeah, you agree it's objective.
But I mean, like laws of nature are objective. Laws of physics are objective. Math is objective. You can have things that are objective without a god just fine.
Well, I don't think there's any way to explain objective morality outside of that.
Law of physics.
I don't think that works.
Well, I mean, so the first problem is the fact that you don't think there is another way to explain it is an argument from ignorance or an argument from incredulity. It's not actually evidence for your case. It's just meaning you can't understand how it could be otherwise, but that's not actually evidence your position is true. It just means you can't understand it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I fully agree. But physics, the ways that we describe stuff, like the theory of gravity, gravity is something that applies to everything all of the time, and we cannot reject gravity. We can't make the choice for gravity to not affect our lives. But we can make the choice for our conscience to stop affecting our lives. In fact, biblically, God allows those who want to harden their hearts to be hardened. If you take Pharaoh, it seems like in the first couple plagues, Pharaoh was making the decision himself. And then as time went on, his heart became so hardened, it became a natural thing. And then there came a point where God's judgment was on him, and God was actually just either hardening it himself or saying, Pharaoh's so far gone, I'm going to pull my natural grace out of this situation. He's not going to be able to unharden his heart.
Okay, so it's like it seems like your argument is like saying if electromagnetism is a force in nature, then everything must be affected by an electromagnetic field, which clearly that's false. Some things have an electromagnetic field, some things don't. So laws of physics don't need to affect everything, they just need to affect certain things in nature. So like there could be another force that's weaker than gravity that it's there, just doesn't it's not strong enough to force us to do anything. And there could be a force that's strong enough that can give us an impulse, but not strong enough to force us to abide by that impulse. So I'm not seeing why that would be a problem at all. That's just many of the forces don't literally affect everything.
Yeah, but then you'd have to have a physical, we have a physical explanation for what makes things stick to the earth. We call that gravity. We don't have a physical explanation for what makes things moral. What makes things
So
objectively moral? We can if we even wanted to argue there's a naturalistic explanation for the mind, we're just moist robots and whatnot, um, we could, but that wouldn't make things objective. That would just make things subject to whatever that robot's programmed to do.
Not quite following. So, like, we can make up an explanation of why physical things make things moral, just like people can make up an explanation for why God makes things moral. There's obviously no scientific evidence that indicates either one of them. So it seems like we're on equal grounds there. The theists have made up an explanation of why they think God makes things moral. I can make up an explanation of why I think a law of physics makes things moral. But neither of those are more supported. They're just stuff we're making up. So it doesn't seem like we have any difference between the hypotheses there. And so it doesn't seem like yours is any more supported. It seems like your idea that only God could account for morality is just that, just your idea. And your incredulity about how it could be a law of physics isn't an argument against the law of physics. And so I can say, I believe a law of physics would make things moral and come up with a hypothetical explanation just like yours for God. And it seems like we're on evil footing. So I don't see why that would be any, it doesn't seem like you've provided any evidence of why the God hypothesis would be more likely or more plausible on to explain morality. It just seems like that's the way you imagine it to be.
Well, from the Christian worldview, God is the standard of perfection. He's the standard of morality. He's the standard of righteousness, justice. So we do have an explanation, but to the same way that I say I don't understand this, similarly, you're saying, well, I reject the idea of God, and so we don't need God, and you're rejecting the idea of God.
Not exactly. So, like, just like you said that in the Christian worldview, God is the standard of morality, I could say in the Platonic worldview, the Platonic object is the standard of morality. So those now have equal grounding for objective morality. You say you don't understand the Platonic object of the law of nature. I say I don't understand how God works. So I don't think God works as a basis of morality at all. It seems incoherent to me. And so it seems like we're on equal footing. We both have something we claim counts as an explanation, and neither of us can, like, it doesn't seem like you can answer any of the greater questions. Like, the reason I would think that secular models are better is because in the field of morality, there are many questions that we have to answer. Like in the field of physics, there's very specific questions about the fine-tuning, the energy density of the universe, perturbation density, and you have to be able to answer those questions to qualify as having a real model of physics. If you can't answer those questions, you don't have a model of physics. In morality, there's the same thing. We need to answer moral intuition, moral progress, the moral dilemmas, the moral paradoxes. And if you can't answer those things, well, then you don't have a model of morality. My model can at least answer those things. It doesn't seem like your model does. It just seems like you're asserting that you have something you've imagined to be a basis of morality. And I can just do the same thing. I can just, okay, I've asserted to have something, I have a basis of morality. So I'm not seeing any reason to think
Well,
that yours is better here.
So I wouldn't pose it as my model, because my aim is to say that I'm coming at it from, again, a biblical worldview. So really, it's God's model.
Well, but just to clarify, when I say yours, I just mean theists versus atheists, so not you in particular.
Sure. Well, the problem with that is that theists can have open disagreements about pretty basic theological concepts, and so one of us has to be wrong. I mean, you can take any example you want. Is it okay to smoke marijuana? I mean, you can make a biblical case for or against it. There could be a certain time for it. There could be a certain time not for it. There's only one right answer. That's what makes it objective. The fact that we can disagree means that everyone has the ability to be wrong. One of us has the ability to be right, but we cannot all be right.
Sure. But I mean,
I would also.
My question was,
sorry.
Just to clarify. So my question was, how is a theistic model of morality where it's grounded in a God more plausible or more evidently supported than an atheistic model of morality where it's grounded in the law of physics? Because there are specific sets of problems and things you need to be able to answer in the field of morality to count as a model of morality. The secular models can do that. The theist models don't. So in that case, the atheist model seems better, but it seems like the only positive evidence you've provided is that you can't imagine it, which works equally as well for the atheistic model. So that's based on the evidence you provided, the atheistic and theistic model are on equal grounds.
Well, I would say, sure, I don't know all the atheistic models, I suppose. But from the theistic model, specifically the Christian model, God's the basis for the objective morality. And I don't mean that, oh, well, we think that God is this or we think that God is that, but God actually is the objective thing. He's the standard. Whereas I don't think that morality actually can be summed up in physics. And I say I don't think that because it doesn't seem logically plausible to me. So if you want to explain your end of it, you can, but God is the objective standard. He is what says right is right, wrong is wrong. He's what it's based against. Because he's outside of his creation, he has the full authority to be that standard. He, by necessity, would be that standard.
So, it seems like you're saying you can't understand how it doesn't work, and in your worldview, this is how it works, and you understand that, and you seem to be claiming that that's evidence that your worldview is more reasonable. Now, obviously, anybody in their own worldview is going to say, my worldview makes sense to me, and your worldview doesn't make sense to me. And so it seems like the only evidence you provided is that you subjectively think this one makes sense, and you subjectively don't think the other one makes sense, which isn't actually evidence. So, like, I can say, the God model makes absolutely no sense to me, none whatsoever.
Sure.
So it doesn't seem like that could work. My model makes perfect sense to me. So I've just provided the exact same evidence for my model as you did for yours. So ours is on equal footing. So you need some kind of objective metric or some criteria or something that the God model can do better
Well,
than the atheistic model. Oh, probably.
I'm giving
Matthew, thank
that.
you for the super chat. Really appreciate it.
I'm giving that. The objective standard for my model is God. That is the thing that you compare everything else against. What he says is right is right. What he says is wrong. Um, and that's the standard we're going against. Now, if we have to be careful because we can say things like, well, we're built in his image and God has written his law on the heart of humanity. I think you can find that in Romans pretty clearly. It's written on our hearts, as well as you can trace certain common threads of morality through society through all of time. So if we have a creator, that works, and that's fine. You could posit another explanation if you want, but that doesn't mean that it's a better explanation. But to the same degree, we have to understand that we are going to have exceptions to the rule of because we're built in God's image, we'll all have this common morality because creation has been blundered by sin. Sin has a negative effect on everything from natural consequences that hurt people to internal personal consequences that hurt people, including themselves, to any other, to war, to political consequence.
I'm
Sin
lost.
invading.
So
What's up?
I'm lost. My question is why is the God explanation better than the natural law explanation? That's like how do we determine one is better than the other? Not, I mean, obviously you saying in your worldview you think this isn't a way to establish which one's better, because in my worldview mine is established this way. So that doesn't give us a way to establish which one's better. So my question is, how do you establish which model of morality is a better model or a worse model?
Well, which one better supports a genuinely objective standard of morality?
What do you mean by genuinely objective? Because from my perspective, objective means true, independent of opinion. So laws of physics are truly objective. So if it's a law of physics, it's objective.
Well, yeah, but that's just saying if. I'm not saying if. I'm saying God is the standard.
Well,
So
if God exists, God is the standard. If the law of physics exists, the law of physics is the standard. So how do we tell the difference between which is better?
Well, right now we're just approaching it from the think tank approach. There are other ways you could test it is what does God say? And if I apply X and God says, well, if you apply X, Y will happen. Will Y happen? That's a way you could test that.
Sure.
I'm not sure that necessarily.
What would
I'm
be
not
X
sure
and
that
Y?
Well, for example, if you God will give you, he says that he'll give you peace that surpasses understanding if you depend on him, if you have faith in him, if you trust in him. And I think if you do that genuinely, he will. Now, there could be a season, such as when Job went through it, that And I believe that that's in Proverbs. So Proverbs cannot be used as universal 100% applications. They're proverbs. They're general rules.
Well,
So
how do we measure that? How do we measure that if you have peace greater than understanding? Is it like serotonin levels in the brain? Can we measure it with an fMRI? Like, how do we tell that you're actually right and that you have, or that a Christian in particular has this peace beyond understanding more so than atheists? Because if atheists have a better peace level, well, then that disproves your hypothesis. So how do we show with like fMRIs or brain scans, how do we show that this is actually the case?
Oh, I don't think you need to do fMRIs or brain scans. I think people could just apply it. But do you I think you've debated Nathan Thompson, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Um, that's always a fun time. He says that you can apply a flat Earth test. Just go out to the ocean, look at the ocean, you'll see it's flat. I'm not a flat earther. I don't believe it's flat. Anyway, that's a bit of an oversimplification for that, but it's not for the case of if God says X will happen, then you can just test God wherever you are right now. Um, because and I don't mean that as in you should put God to the test and say, God, you have to cater to my will. But if you are seeking God and you are if you are seeking to glorify God through your living, and you are using God's word to guide you, then what He offers is going to be seen over time to be true. And again, I bring up Job as that because Job probably did not have peace when he was scraping the boils off of his flesh. He was still giving honor to God. He was still fully aware that God was God. He didn't deny God, but I'm sure he had a little anxiety, a little stress when that was happening.
Right.
In the end, it resulted in it, and he endured. But
Well, my objection wouldn't be the Job objection. So I'm not going to make the objection that some Christians wouldn't necessarily be happy all the time. My argument is this peace beyond understanding thing. This has got to be some kind of a feeling or a sensation or an emotion of some kind. And we want to know, is that the pinnacle of peace that we can experience? Like, is if you're an atheist and you experience an even greater level of peace, would that disprove your hypothesis?
no, well, actually, let me backtrack. I'm not actually answering that at this moment, so forgive me. You said there has to be a feeling or something. No, that I mean, I could pull up the text, but peace that surpasses understanding, that's that could be feelings, but that sounds logical to me. As in certain situations, this peace doesn't make any sense. And you can say, well, God doesn't exist, so let me figure something else out. But the problem is I'm saying God exists. I'm saying because God exists, He claims this, and this claim can be verifiable through experience.
Well, I'm asking, how do you verify it? Is it like, to verify it through experience? You have to experience it. It has to be an
Yeah,
experience of
yeah,
some kind. So I'm guessing it's not a sense experience. You don't like see peace as like an object over there. It's probably something you feel internally of some kind, right?
yeah,
Okay,
yep,
so that
sure.
feeling internally. Now, what if there's a different ideology that gives you an even greater feeling of peace, like
It could
atheism?
also
Suppose.
be it could also be an unlocking of your mind in the sense that so I'm an overthinker, and so my lack of peace could be from my mind getting hung up. So the peace could be emotional, or it could just be the genuine relief of I pray about something, surrender it to God, and it's actually gone. Something that I have no other explanation because I am the overthinker. It is common for me. It's how I operate. That has now been overcome for some reason in this situation, which is unusual. And so you could chalk that up to coincidence, but the fact is, it goes against what's normal.
So again, I'm asking, how can I confirm this? So if we turn to God and believe in God, we're going to have some sensation, some experience, which is different from doing something alternative to turning from God, right? So you're saying that if we turn to God, this experience will occur, and it will not occur if we don't turn to God, right?
No, not necessarily.
So if we can get this sensation in other ways that have nothing to do with God, then how is that evidence of God?
Well, you can't. So, gosh, this is um, you can't, because even if you don't give God credit for, the Christian worldview claims common grace. Peace is grace from God. And so anyone, the most devout atheist could experience God's common grace. Living a wealthy, happy, fruitful life, that's common grace. And you could deny God the entire time that you're doing that. So I'm not saying that those who don't believe in God won't have that. I'm saying God accounts for why it happens regardless of what you believe. Um, and also, you'll be able to. Well, actually, I'll leave it there and see what you have to say about that.
Well, that seems like begging the question. So I'm asking, how can we test, like you mentioned, how can we demonstrate God is real and a better grounds or of morality or whatever? And you said, because if you follow God, you will have the sensation. But then you said, oh, but you can also have the sensation if you don't follow God. So that seems to undermine your argument. So now your original argument that you can prove God is a better ground of morality because you can follow him and get the sensation is
Yeah.
false, because you can get the same sensation without following God, which means you're back to stage one where you don't have any evidence.
Well, boy, what a conundrum. Um, so I think we need to back up for a minute. Common grace means that it can happen to you regardless of what you believe. God being the explanation is separate from what you believe. He explains it. You don't have to believe in him, but he is the objective basis for that. Crud, I had another train of thought and I just lost it. Repeat your critique of me.
Right. So my argument, what I was asking is why is God a better basis of morality than natural law? And you said the reason God is better is because we can demonstrate he exists through this experiment. He says do X and you will get Y. If you do X, you will get Y. And the do X, I asked, what is the do X and what is the Y? And you said the do X is follow God of some way. Follow the teachings
Yeah.
of God or something. And then you will experience this unending peace or this unimaginable peace of some kind. And then I asked, well, okay, can you experience this unending peace without following God? And you're like, yes, you can. And well, that means that it's not do X get Y, because now there's do Z get Y or do A get Y. You can get Y in lots of different ways. So if you want to show that God is more likely to be real by some experiment of do X get Y, you need to give me an example of do X, which is following God or whatever, and then getting Y, which doesn't happen in lots of other ways. Because if it happens in lots of other ways, then it wouldn't be evidence of God, because it could be explained by any of those other ways.
Oh, that is not Proverbs. Also, I misquoted that. Will guard your heart's mind. So, unfortunately, I may have taken that passage a bit out of context. But I'm not the peace is not a peace that's one never ending, because I think that would go against my Job argument, because as common as grace is, unfortunately in this world, sin is equally as common. But the part that's surpassing understanding, that um, again, that's a logical. I would say that that's a logical approach. It doesn't mean that you necessarily get a feeling, but you understand that the peace you're getting doesn't make sense per any other situation. And I will say, I did take that out of context, so perhaps we should move on from that verse, because it's in Philippians, not Proverbs, and it looks like that Paul is actually speaking to the church, as he's saying, the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. So if we're depending on Christ Jesus, then we will have a peace, and I can attest to that. That does surpass understanding. That doesn't mean we're not going to have valleys, because my sin, which is ingrained in me, unfortunately still gets the best of me at times. But I still do have peace that surpasses understanding, very obviously at times, and other times I'm not paying attention to it, so it really doesn't help me.
Okay, so the question is why is God-based morality better than secular-based morality? And I don't think you provided any reason why one would be better. Like, if I say, why is a hammer better than a screwdriver? Well, I can use a hammer to hammer things. I can demonstrate it's a tool that is more effective for more things or whatever. So you need to demonstrate that God-based morality is more reasonable, more plausible, can do more things than secular basic ethics. Some give me some method or some criteria to show that God-based morality is a better thing to believe than
It
secular-based morality.
it has an objective standard. It doesn't matter what you think; it's objective.
So does the secular morality. So that doesn't work. What else?
What is it? Let's talk
Law
about
of
that.
physics.
That what is the law of physics?
It's a field. Like laws of physics describe fields that exist. There's a moral field, like there's a gravitational field.
Right, but we can explain gravity. Explain how a moral law of physics works.
Exactly the same way gravity does, except with moral principles. It just goes throughout the universe. Like what is the difficulty here?
That gravity's you cannot decide not to adhere to gravity, but
I,
you
I
can
already I
decide
already
to.
addressed that. Remember before, like electromagnetism is a law of physics, but your argument is that, well, if it's a law of physics, everything must have an electromagnetic field. That's false. So no, it doesn't need to affect everything that way. That's false. It can be weak enough that it doesn't force you to act and still be a law of physics. So that doesn't work.
Well, so is it sure? But if you have a magnetic field that's strong, is at a certain point a certain strength, then anything at that point will be affected by that strength. It's all at the same point.
If it
So
has
are
an
you saying
electromagnetic field.
sure, yeah, but still that I'm comparing apples to apples. I'm not saying you can take a piece of plastic and do that. I'm saying something that is attracted to that will be equally attracted to it if it's in that same spot, if it's compared to that same standard.
Yeah.
Right. You can't do that with morality, because what's the standard of morality that's binding people like that magnetic field binds anything in that spot?
The physical field of morality. It's a field. So it's a field like gravity. There's no problem here. This is pretty easy to understand.
Well, no, it is a problem because there's a whole theory that explains how gravity works to the best of our abilities, but you're just saying there's a field, so that's as good as me saying there's a God, but then it could be Zeus or anything else. But God is, by definition, perfect, unchanging, and because he's perfect and unchanging, he can be the standard because he's
So
perfect and unchanging.
so the field is perfect and unchanging by definition, so it can be the standard.
Yeah, but it's a field.
Yep.
But
Which is better than a
a
god. So
field, but it's
it's a
not.
better candidate for perfect and unchanging than a god.
No, because a field is a field. God is God.
Yes.
You're not comparing apples to apples. You're comparing apples to oranges. That's like saying, well, a rock is unchanging. Okay, you could say a rock's unchanging. That doesn't mean it is. God is by definition unchanging. I can think of lots of fields that can change. Fields are not by definition unchanging.
Well,
God
I can think
is.
of lots of gods that change. Gods are not by definition unchanging. So definitions aren't an argument here. Definitions are the way you think of things. Definitions aren't binding. They're just the way you think of things. So it doesn't actually prove anything. I can just say the definition of the field is it's an unchanging moral field. Okay, problem solved. Like definitions don't force anything to do anything in reality.
Well, you're inferring that there's other gods, like Zeus. Sure, he's changing, but there is a reason that God told us not to deal with false gods, because then it's going to skew what God is. And so humanity has really gone head over heels over the false gods thing, and so it's very easy to get confused.
I don't think
I'm
you're
talking
following.
about
I don't think you're following it. So you've made up a god.
ditto.
You have an imaginary friend named God, and you think it has these properties. Now I can make up a different imaginary friend with different properties and call that a god, and those are equal. They're exactly the same. There's no more one's no more better than the other. So my definition of a god of Zeus is equal to your definition of a god as Yahweh. They're both just things we've made up. There's not evidence
But
it's true.
Zeus and Yahweh aren't compatible. They're completely different entities in their existence. Zeus has characteristics that
Yeah, yes, it has
are
a different made up definition than your made up definition, but they're still both made up definitions.
uh, yeah, but that one's not rational against what we see in reality. God being an objective, perfect source, it is rational. It's a rational line of thought.
Wait, okay, so you said it's not rational in what we see in reality. No, I'm not seeing the difference here.
Yep.
Like both are made up, both are false. All the evidence
Let's
indicates
take who is the god that rode in the chariot that pulled the sun across the sky?
Helios.
Right. There's some problems with that analogy. It's a god that's a chariot that's pulling the sun across the sky.
Yeah.
None of that happens in reality. A
Yeah.
perfect omniscient God who's outside of our universe
We don't. That
Could
doesn't
work
happen
with
in reality
reality.
either.
How do you know?
The same reason we know there's no Helios pulling the sun. There's no evidence of it.
That we can test that by looking at the sun and saying, is there a chariot pulling it? How do you empirically test if God exists outside of our physical universe?
Well, it seems like you're making an argument from ignorance here. It seems like the Helios could be invisible, or it could be outside of our known laws of physics. Like the fact that we don't see it doesn't prove it's not there. So saying that we don't see it is not an evidence that your God is correct. It's like saying, oh, look, there are 10 axles. The first 9 are broken, therefore the 10th must work. Like, obviously, you understand that that's false, right? Like, if I have 10 car axles and I look at the first 9 and all first of the 9 ones are broken, does that prove that the 10th works?
No, that's like the gambler's fallacy.
Yes.
You can't base a, yeah.
Right. So the same thing would apply here. Even if Zeus and Helios were proven false, that doesn't prove that yours is correct.
Well,
And so they're
right.
still on the same
Well,
the same footings.
Well, no, it's not. Because what I'm pointing out is Helios has fully testable things that we can say that is just a myth, because there is absolutely no way to verify the claim. God's not claiming to be a chariot. He's claiming to be the creator who's outside of and not bound by this.
But
Ergo, even if we can't understand it, that again, it would be an argument from ignorance to say, well, I can't understand how God could possibly be metaphysical or outside of this universe. Ergo, God can't exist because I can't understand that. That's also an argument from ignorance.
well, no. So again, you're assuming that Helios predicts to be a physical thing that we can physically see, which it does not. It does not predict that. No, none of the Greek gods say that they're made of particles that we can literally see. In fact, they can be invisible whenever they want to. So Helios could be invisible. It could be outside of our space-time, which means the fact that he's a chariot pulling the sun is not disproven. That is not disproven at all. In fact, you can't. It's unfalsifiable, the Greek god claims. So they could still be there. We just can't see them because they're not physical things that we can interact with. So they're the same kind of thing. Neither has been falsified. And this is, again...
How do we know Helios claims to be a chariot? Like,
the same reason Jesus claims to be a sword.
But the claim, okay, so let's take the Helios one. That's fine. That still works in my favor because Helios claims to be a chariot. So it's like, well, okay, that's great.
He's on a chariot.
What can you, or beyond the chariot, yeah. What can you do to show us that?
Nothing.
Nothing.
It's outside of our known physics.
Sure, but the claim that is being made by Helios is not verifiable. The claims that are made by God are verifiable.
Like what?
I think you're going to be limited if you think that we can understand everything from a physical premise. I think
what you said is really great there. So if you say, if there are some verifiable claims by God, that would be great evidence. That would give us something to work with. What are the verifiable claims by God?
Well, if you trust in Jesus Christ, like it says in Philippians, then it'll give you peace that surpasses understanding.
Well, right, but that's not a testable claim because you have no way to falsify it. So that's equally as unfalsifiable as the Helios claim. Because, like as I said, if that same sensation can be caused by atheism or not God, then that isn't a verifiable claim. You can't verify this because there's lots of different ways to cause that.
Yeah, but I can verify that claim. You could then claim, oh, well, if you go and you smell a trash can, then you'll get the same thing. Well, I can test that. If I smell the trash can, it's probably not going to happen. But I can tell you from personal experience that it does happen. Again, understanding the full nature of sin and whatnot imperfectly. But the claim is consistent, and I've tested that in my own life. You could test that in your own life too, which obviously would require a lack of atheism. And anybody else watching this could test that.
Well, that's again an anecdotal fallacy, because even if you have a mental experience where you have this sensation, if someone else has that same mental experience from a different belief system, a different God, non-God, watching football, then that proves that sensation is not unique to God. It's something that anybody can get with a variety of different causes. So in order to verify your claim, it can't just be your subjective experience. You need some way to show this is the sensation in the brain. Here's how we can measure it. It only occurs in people who believe in God. You need something more to show that it's not anecdotal. It's not just something in your personal subjective experience, but something that we can actually verify. Because if your only claim is that if you worship God, you will get some strange sense experience that you can't explain, everybody gets that from every belief. I could say if you worship football, you'll get a strange sense experience you can't explain, and that will be true. If you worship potatoes, you'll get a strange sense experience you can't explain, and that will be true. People get strange sense experiences they can't explain all the time. In order to make this actually evidence that is actually a confirmable cause and effect relation, you need to show here is the sensation we're having in the brain. It can only be gotten through this methodology, and it's not just a random sensation that lots of people get all of the time. Because if it is, that wouldn't be evidence. It'd be like if I said, if you pray to God, it will rain within the next week or whatever. And you could pray to whatever, it's going to rain in the next week, regardless of whether or not it's you pray to God. So if you can't show an actual correlation between the God belief and the sensation, it's just a sensation people get at a random interval, regardless of their ideology, random chance kind of a thing, then it proves it's not evidence of a God, which means you have to demonstrate that this sensation you're getting is causally related from the God belief and not just something that happens by random chance.
Well, I don't actually think that that line of thinking works, because you can have two separate causes for something that don't invalidate each other. Such as if I'm hungry, I can go eat a sandwich, or I could go get a feeding tube and have things fed through that. One is me literally eating a sandwich. The other one's me being fed mush through a feeding tube. I will still get full from both of those in this experiment, or in this hypothetical. But
Right?
that doesn't mean that because I can get full from a feeding tube, eating a sandwich is not feasible.
Correct.
So
I agree.
one example that I would use is, and this is a pretty serious topic. Take depression, for example. There are people who suffer from genuine chronic depression, and it is a blessing that we have medical intervention. And I would never, no one should ever condemn using medicine as it should be appropriately used for. But that being said, I think there's a great deal of depression that we invoke on ourselves. That's not what I just said, because again, there are things outside of our control. Um, there are things that we can do to put ourselves in a state of depression, and God says, well, if you depend on me, you won't have to struggle with that, because the thing you're struggling with is something that's contradiction to me. So if you keep picking that thing, it's going to keep affecting you in that way. But if you pick me, that burden can be taken away. You could simulate that same effect by becoming dependent on antidepressant. So I think that those are two things that could do a similar thing, but the antidepressant in no way disproves God.
Um, right. So the argument here would be is like, imagine if I said, I'm going to prove the spaghetti monster exists, and my proof the spaghetti monster exists is that the sun rises tomorrow. Well, I mean, that's not proof the spaghetti monster exists, because there's already a natural solution that explains that. So if you're trying to prove something new that we don't have evidence for, you need to provide something that doesn't already have a natural explanation, because if it does, then that wouldn't be evidence of your hypothesis. So it's called, like if I said, I saw a dog, that's reasonable to believe. If I said I saw a unicorn, that's not reasonable to believe. If there's already a natural explanation that we know and is proven to exist that can explain the data, that same phenomenon occurring in the same conditions would not be evidence of some new phenomenon. So like saying the sun will rise tomorrow isn't evidence of God, and saying you get some curing depression isn't evidence of God. It's just evidence of human psychology.
What comparing, if you take a claim, you have to test something against what it claims. If God claims that he'll do that and he does that, then you're testing him. Again, if an antidepressant claims it will do that, you're testing the antidepressant. If the antidepressant doesn't work and you say, well, this isn't an antidepressant because it doesn't work. If God claims to do that and it doesn't do that, and again, we have to understand that sin does not make it possible for common grace to be perfect. But if it does not do that consistently, if God falls on his claims that he makes, when they are genuinely being implemented, if that's even the right way to say that, then that would be, well, then this is just a bunch of claims that don't actually happen, that don't actually do anything. I want to go back to the spaghetti monster analogy, because that analogy, I don't know how that one has so much traction. I think it breaks down pretty easily. And that might actually be a better one than the I'm terrible with names, so the guy riding the chariot around the sun.
Helios.
Yes.
But
So
I wanted to so like if you said evidence of God is the sun will rise tomorrow, I can say no, that's evidence of physics. There's something else that explains that. So if you say evidence of God is that I got this super powerful emotional response, I can say, nope, that's just evidence of cortisol working in your brain. So the fact that you claim that this is evidence of God, if it's a super common experience you can get in lots of ways, wouldn't be evidence of God. It's just evidence of the natural phenomenon we already know about. So mundane things that we already know about can't be evidence of God. God will cause the wind to blow tomorrow. Like, no one's going to accept that as evidence because it's already going to blow tomorrow. So if you're
Yeah, but
predicting things
it,
that we already know about, it's not evidence. You have to predict something we don't know about or can't understand or will be higher probability to happen under God or something. Like if more Christians were able to cure their major depression by worshiping God, that would be great evidence. It just doesn't happen. It's false. Most Christians can't. Most people who have major depression leave
I think it does
Christianity like I
happen.
did. So what cured my depression was sex, not God. And so you can
Yeah.
get that curing of major depression in a multitude of ways that has nothing to do with the God. And so God having a religious belief that can cause you to cure your depression wouldn't be evidence the religious belief is true. It's evidence that it causes the same mental phenomenon that all of the other things cause to cause a curing of your depression. So that wouldn't be evidence. But if you want
Um,
to talk about the spaghetti monster,
I
that's fine.
actually would say I don't think that you have statistics to back up that Christians, and I would offer legitimate biblical Christians, not Christians who say I'm a Christian but then go against God's word, because that's by definition not a Christian. But legitimate Christians take sex lives, for example. Um, I'll have to look it up, but I think there was a study done that showed that Christians were genuinely more content in their sex lives with their spouses than secular people were. And that's just one example. So I would argue that, again, holding Christians to the claim of Christianity, Christians are probably less depressed than secular people are in general. I would absolutely make that claim. Now, what resource you're going to use? If you use a secular resource, well, then we can claim, okay, well, a secular review said, of course, they're going to go against Christianity. And if you take a Christian resource, then you would hope that they're being honest, just like you would with a secular resource, but certainly there can be biases paired in with that. Um, so I don't actually know how statistically we can prove that,
Oh, we
but each
can. There's
individual person, like I said,
Well, statistically, we
can do
can
that
prove that. There's
themselves.
tons of studies on the effects of religiosity and non-religiosity and the effects on society. And there's a Pew Religious Forum survey thingy that compares the different outcomes of more secular to less secular states in America. And the more religious states do worse on pretty much everything: child pregnancy, disease, crime, poverty, just every statistic imaginable they do worse on. So we do have stats on that. So that would, if you're going to go with the stats, we can just look at the Pew Surveys data, and atheism wins.
Well, yeah, but I like Pew. I think Pew does a pretty good job at being unbiased. I appreciate them. They're not perfect, but what does religious mean? Because
Um,
Christianity, it certainly is not just religious, because there's a lot of religious people claiming Christianity who are religious, but I would not say that they're Christian simply based on the biblical passages God has given us to kind of know who you're talking to, kind of thing.
right. That seems like a no true Scotsman, but you can go based off of any statistic you want. Like if you want to pick the criterion of adheres to this set of passages in the Bible, you're going to get the same result. So it's church attendance, the people who have conviction in God, the more people who pray more often, like the 5 times a day. They were comparing it to all religions, so it was they did each religion separately. So Islam was one of them. Whatever statistic you want to go with, you're going to get the same result.
Well, that seems to be a common trend of sin being able to corrupt God's common grace while we're in this world. Um, so that's pretty consistent. But I would say that yeah, you can't take a religious action and say, okay, that's someone who believes in God, because Jesus openly condemned the Pharisees for fasting and showing how much they fasted, and for praying and showing how much they prayed, and for donating and showing how much they donated. I mean, they probably gave and prayed and fasted more than most of the people around them, but at the end of the day, the Pharisee who was talking about how good he was in the temple was that much less pure than whoever was the beggar or the tax collector or whatnot next to him. So humans are really good because of sin at corrupting God's perfect design and intention. And so, as long as we're trying to use humans as the standard, it's going to be very hard to do that. But we personally can test these in our lives and our relationships with God.
Well, you can't, because that's an anecdotal fallacy. You have to show that there is a difference between the success rate of this, whatever you're testing, and random chance. And you can't do that personally because it's an anecdotal fallacy. But you can pick whatever stats you want. All of the studies that have all picked, these are done mostly by Christian organizations like the Templeton Foundation. You can pick whatever stats you want to try and identify the true Christians who have better lives, and you're going to get the same results. Secular people are better at pretty much everything always. If you compare like in states in the U.S. or countries in the world, you always get the same result. Secular people are better off in pretty much every statistic.
Yeah, but what does better mean?
Less of the bad stuff. So like in the case of rape,
Sure.
it's less rape. In the case of crime, it's less crime. In the case of divorce, it's less divorce. In the case of child pregnancy, it's less child pregnancy. In the case of famine, it's less famine. In the case of housing, it's less homelessness. Like whatever pick whatever stats you want. Like many Christian organizations have tried this, and they've tried to find the stat that represents the true Christian, but every single study they do finds that secular nations do better. So there's been no successful studies by Christians that have been able to identify that the true Christians are better than the secular organizations. But if you want to do a different one and find the correct stats, that's totally fine. You can do that. Just all of the stats, all of the data in all of the world seems to indicate that's not the case.
Well, that's just silly, because sin corrupts everything. So even if you were right, there would be some stats that go against what you're saying, because that's just the nature of the world. Even things that should be perfect aren't. But assuming that you're right, which I don't think you are, but what are some studies that you can cite that can actually point me to that direction? Because I'd love to see what you got and to see where they're actually originating from.
All right, let's go to. I just did a debate on this with Islam. Desktop 2, live debates, Kenny Boomer. If you are curious as to which states are the most and least religious, simply check out the Pew Forum's Religious Landscape Survey. So that's Pew Forum's Religious Landscape Survey. It's all there, and you can go ahead and check out the various states varying in terms of social well-being. The correlation is clear and strong. The more secular tends to fare better than the more religious on a vast host of measures, including homicide, violent crime rates, poverty rates, obesity, diabetes rates, child abuse rates, educational attainment levels, income levels, unemployment rates, rates of sexually transmitted diseases and teen pregnancy, etc. You name it, it's on nearly every sociological measure of well-being. You are most likely to find the more secular states with the lowest levels of faith in God and the lowest rates of church attendance faring best, and the most religious states with the highest levels of faith in God and rates of church attendance faring the worst. So, Pew Forum's Religious Landscape Survey.
Got it. What else you got?
Well, that one just gave like a bunch of stuff. So, I mean, I could find more, but I don't really need to.
Well, if you're going to claim that everything points that way, then it should be pretty easy to just give a few more.
Well, I mean, I just gave one that listed about 20 different metrics of value in life. I mean, I could find other ones. It's not hard.
Is that so? Did this one study look at all those values,
yes.
Or was it 20 independent studies?
Both. It's a meta study.
Right, but it was conducted by, I would assume, one organization or one group of people, one umbrella of people. It wasn't these people over in Taiwan who have no idea who these people are over here. It's not multiple studies from different places.
It's a meta study. You know what a meta study is? It's a study that combines a bunch of different other studies and then does correlation data that shows that they're correct. So it does both. So thank you for the super chat, Matthew. Appreciate it.
Got it. So does this Pew Forum list where I would assume that it lists where all of this information is coming from, what studies it's being sourced from?
Yes, you can go find that on their bibliography if you would like.
Sure. Okay. Well, very good. So on that note, let's go back to the flying spaghetti monster analogy after I take a drink.
Sure. Did I bring out the flying spaghetti monster yet, or is this
Yes, you did. So one big thing that I think we're missing here, and this is why it's hard to, So let's go back to flat Earth for a minute.
Well, could you tell me what the context of the flying spaghetti monster analogy was? Because I don't remember when I used it.
Yeah, it was, I think it was just saying, well, I could say that this flying spaghetti monster is an explanation for X and Y and Z versus your God.
Gotcha.
I believe that sums it up. So the problem that I have, and I actually used this against the flat against Nathan when I was debating him, but the issue that flat earthers have is because they refuse to accept what gravity is, they cannot properly comprehend what it is. It's not until you say, let me genuinely take this in and have an understanding for it, that you can start to do that. As long as you're going to just bold face reject it like they do. So I don't know where you would fall on that level, but if you're not willing to accept God for who he claims he is, then a lot of what he claims isn't going to make sense. And I come at this presuppositionally because I don't believe that there is, and maybe I'm missing something, but I don't believe there is a successful, purely empirical argument that can prove God, but there absolutely is individually by holding God to his claims. And we have to compare a claimer against his claims to figure out if he's consistent. God is consistent with what he's claiming, and it makes sense in reality. Whereas the flying spaghetti monster doesn't make sense because it claims to be a flying spaghetti monster, and none of those make sense in reality. Well, flying a spaghetti and monsters maybe do, but not together. That doesn't make any sense.
I'm not following what you're saying. So, do you understand what logical possibility is in philosophy?
It's possible logically. No,
Yes.
please elaborate.
It means there's no logical contradiction. So things like a round square, a
Yep.
married bachelor, those are things that are logically impossible. It's logically possible if it doesn't have a logical contradiction in it. So a flying spaghetti monster is logically possible. It's possible to have all those things, and they could be not like literal spaghetti, or it could be like magic spaghetti or non-physical spaghetti. That's perfectly fine. So you can have spiritual spaghetti, and it's flying spiritual spaghetti monster or whatever. So there's nothing contradictory with a flying spaghetti monster any more than there is. Well, actually, I think there are many contradictory properties of God. So to me, it seems like having a magical flying spaghetti monster is equally, if not slightly more plausible than a god here. I don't see why there would be a difference.
So do you believe in magic?
No, but it's equally as
So it's
plausible
less
as a god.
plausible.
Yeah.
No, it's not, because God
How
doesn't
so?
claim magic. He claims to be God. He's omnipotent. That's not magic. That's omnipotence.
I don't see the difference between a spiritual supernatural realm and a magical realm. Like those both seem to be equally as plausible here.
Why? That's I would offer that's an argument from ignorance, because magic is I don't actually know what the definition of magic would be, but supernatural is just something that supersedes, that's outside of what we can naturally see, naturally experience. God, if we are the creation and he is the creator, that would mean he can't be bound by what he created.
So like saying magic here would be just a different ontology. So you know there's different possible ontologies. We have the physical world. There could be a supernatural world. There could be a magical world. There could be an ubernatural world. There could be all these different kinds
Yeah.
of realms of stuff. Magic would just be a different realm of stuff, just like the supernatural would be a different realm of stuff.
Yeah, so I would disagree with the magical realm, and I would say the supernatural realm exists
Why?
because they're
Because
different.
sure, they're different, but why would we say one is
Yep.
more likely than the other? Because it seems like we're both just making up new ontologies. Why would?
Um, well, with God being, again, the event horizon, existence points to God. Like I said, existence is God's event horizon. Everything points to him, and I'm trying to morality points to him because he's the objective standard, which we're trying to get to here. Um, so the there, if God exists, then a supernatural realm is necessary. I would posit that God's existence is necessary for the natural realm. And so the fact that it's just reality, and that's how I'm making that argument.
Oh, sure. So before I go,
But God doesn't claim anything magical. He claims, I did this. I am in my essence, in my being, supernatural, because the natural is what I have created. So holding God to his claims, he doesn't claim magic, he just claims omniscience. I'm holding him to what he claims. But a flying spaghetti monster, which I guess you'd have to believe in magic unless he's claiming to be supernatural, but flying spaghetti and monster are all natural things. So that doesn't really make any sense.
well, I mean, not really, because I mean, consciousness is a natural thing. Thoughts are a natural thing. You could just label God's properties as natural things too, and you'd say, well, that's just an analogy. They're not really God isn't conscious in the same way we're conscious because it's just an analogy, right?
Well, so that's interesting. Does God think?
In the same way
Well, if
we
he's
do.
real, just
You'd say it's
what?
slightly different. It's not the same as we do, right? There's a difference between the way God does it and the way we do it, right?
Well, actually, no. I'm actually not sure he does, because what's required for thinking?
Does God have a mind? Is he conscious?
Um, I think that's the best way we can explain him. But I'm trying to get somewhere with this.
What,
That's the
what,
best way we can explain. Does God? Can God change his mind?
I
If
don't
it would
I
be a
don't mind if he can change his mind or not. I'm just trying. There's a few points I wanted to bring up, and so one of them is God is conscious, but not in the same way we are conscious. Right? There's a slight difference between those two, between the way we're conscious and the way God's conscious. They're not the exact same.
well, I would assume so, but I'm not able to study God's
Right,
consciousness.
right. That's
But
fine. That's fine. So,
what we
so
can study
wait, wait, wait,
is
wait, wait,
well,
wait. So, hold up. So, yes, I agree that there is some difference. There must be some difference between God's consciousness and we're conscious. But we use the same word consciousness for both because it's the closest we can get with our language. The same thing could apply to the flying spaghetti monster. It may be analogous to our spaghetti, but not literally our spaghetti. So your argument that the word spaghetti and the word flying and the word monster must necessarily apply to the way we understand them exactly would be like if I said, if you're saying God's conscious, he must be exactly like the way we're conscious because that's what the word means. That's not how it works. They don't literally need to be actual spaghetti. It can be proverbial spaghetti. But I wanted to apply. Thanks you for the super chat, Matthew and Grant. Gary Grant asked, "Can you ask Ben when did God make all these claims?"
sit down.
I will not sit down.
Well, they're sorry, not you, my dog. Um, okay, that's fine. Come on. In Scripture, he makes all the claims that we know of in Scripture. Okay,
I think he's
my
asking if
dog
you're like a
is.
young Earth creationist, so like 6,000 years ago or whatever.
Oh well, yeah, I'm a young Earth creationist. Again, I don't argue necessarily from an empirical standpoint. That I don't want to get into that conversation because I'm actually prepping for debate tomorrow on that topic.
Sure. That was just a super chat,
So
so you don't have
I'm
to go.
tired of thinking
Yeah.
about young Earth creationism.
But back to the
No.
spaghetti monster. So just like
Yes.
God's
So
consciousness
hang
isn't
on.
like ours, spaghetti
There's
doesn't need to
a.
be
I
literal
think
spaghetti.
there's a. I think there's a. We can agree that God is the flying spaghetti monster if we can change definitions such as if instead of flying you mean omniscient, and if instead of spaghetti, instead of literal spaghetti, spaghetti means omnipotent, and instead of literal monster, it means omnipresent. If we change all the meanings to mean God, well then we've got God. We just call him the flying spaghetti monster. But if we call it flying spaghetti monster, but it actually has all the attributes of God and no attributes of spaghetti, then we're still talking about God, just like you can call gravity Bahajapash, and I can call it that all I want, but it's still gravity. So
Right,
if we
we're not.
start saying this, if we start saying the flying spaghetti monster has all these attributes that are God's claimed attributes, it seems like we're calling him God. We're describing God. We just don't want to call him that.
So that's not what I was saying. So I was saying that just like in the Christian worldview. So if you say God is conscious and we are conscious, and that's the same word, but they mean slightly different things, right? They don't mean literally the same thing. If we say in the
Maybe slightly.
Pastafarian worldview, they say it's a spaghetti monster, a flying spaghetti monster, but the word flying and spaghetti don't mean the exact same thing as they do here. So they're similar, but not exactly the same. They're not describing God. They're not using omniscience, omnipresence. It's literally just magical spaghetti. It's not non-physical spaghetti. It's still spaghetti, but it's non-physical magical spaghetti, and it's non-physically magically flying, and it's a non-physical magical monster. But it's
So
still
all
a
you're
non.
doing,
What?
so all you're doing is taking the physical thing we have and adding magical to it.
Yes. So it's just like you're taking consciousness and adding some new properties to it to make it like God. We're just changing it slightly, so it's analogous.
Well, no. So you might have to fully reformat a definition. For example, when God wipes out the earth with Noah's flood, it says he regretted making humanity. God does not have the ability in omniscience to regret, but that is the best way he can convey what is going on to humanity because we have no idea what it's like to be omniscient.
Right.
And so that's when he says regret, it's actually not regret. Like that meaning would change completely, but it's how he's describing what's going on to us. So it's not regret plus magic. It's actually him expressing himself in a way that doesn't mean literally regretted. So it's not literal spaghetti with magic sprinkled on top, just like it's not literal regret with magic on it. It's a full different definition.
Right, exactly. So magical flying spaghetti is just the best analogy the flying spaghetti monster can give us to try and help us understand his magical realm and what he's made of.
Right, but that's why I don't believe in the flying spaghetti monster, because it's the flying spaghetti monster. That has that if the flying spaghetti monster can offer a a perfect and an unchanging basis for morality, then it is God. We're just calling it the flying spaghetti monster. But if it can't do that, then it is certainly not God, because that's what God claims to do.
Well, again, it seems like you're presupposing there's only one way God could be, and that's false. You can have there's many different ways an omniscient being could be, an omnipotent being could be. There's like there could be one that
Well,
only
not
wants what?
you're presupposing that there's that God isn't real, because if God is objectively one God, if Yahweh is the only one, then no others have the ability to exist. So you are assuming that God doesn't exist, or all gods are equal or fictional, which
No.
again you then are you're having the flaw you're trying to push into my argument is actually the one being exposed in yours in that basis.
No, no, because all I'm using is logical possibility here. Is there a logical contradiction with an all-powerful, magical flying, magical spaghetti monster? No, there's no
Yeah.
logical contradiction in those things, as far as I can tell.
Well, there's I guess um sure, but then let's test that. There's no logical contradiction with me being able to make my hair disappear, but there is a contradiction with reality, because even though it's logically plausible, it's not real. Like it can't happen. So
Wait,
there
what do you
is
mean?
no
Because to me, it seems like it's equally as possible for the spaghetti monster to exist as for the Christian God to exist. So I don't see the difference between the two in this example. It
well,
seems like
that's
they're
what I'm that's why I'm saying it's important that we test something against its claims. I'm claiming I can make my hair disappear. Fully logically reasonable. Okay, we'll do it. I can't. I cannot make my hair disappear. That's not something that happens. If we test God against his claims, there's no confliction with reality if we're taking God at his word, not at our assumptions about him. That's why we have to compare God to what he claims.
well.
It's
So
like if
well, there's two things there. One is that I see more errors in the Bible, the Christian Bible, than I do the Pastafarian Bible. The Pastafarian Bible is pretty well grounded on science, so it seems like that's more accurate. So it seems like the Pastafarian God is more in correspondence to reality than the Christian God. And the only example that you've given of being able to test God is something that is pretty common psychological feature that you can get a lot of ways, just like the rain falling and making the grass wet. It's not really particularly good evidence. So I'm not seeing what your examples are here, because to me it seems like Spaghetti Monster's book is more in correspondence to reality and has less mistakes. The Bible has tons of mistakes and doesn't correspond to reality, and you haven't provided any way to test God that isn't something that's mundane that we already know about.
if the flying spaghetti monster is the flying spaghetti monster omnipotent?
Depends on which version you read. We can go with yes, sure. Why not? I don't care.
Okay, well, if it's not, then it's not all powerful, which means there's things outside of its control. So how can we trust it?
Wait, did you say
Is it
omniscience or omnipotence?
omnipotent?
So yeah, I
I
think
meant
it
to
would
say
be.
omnipotent.
Yeah, I think it would be omnipotent. Yes,
Okay, would it also be omniscient?
maybe. I don't think it requires that.
Okay, well, God will require that, because if
Why?
he's not all knowing, then how can he be sovereign, which he claims to be?
Why would I don't understand the word either of those words here. So I don't think if something's omnipotent and it created the universe, it can be God, and it doesn't need to be sovereign or omniscient. Like none of those, neither of those are
Oh, I
required.
I changed the word. I changed the word to omniscient there
Yeah,
at the end.
yeah,
So is right, omniscient.
right,
So omniscient is all knowing.
right. You don't need that. You don't need that to be God. There can be a God who created everything and isn't all knowing.
Uh, I wouldn't agree with that, but
Why?
I don't know how that would work. Which is a claim from ignorance. So just stand by. Let me think about that for a second. Um, well, because if he's not all knowing, then it goes back to reliability. We can't trust him if he's not all knowing because he doesn't know what's going to happen. So any promise he makes to us could just fall flat.
Well, why does that make him any less God? If he's the most powerful being who created literally everything else, he's still God. Doesn't matter if he's trustworthy.
Well, sure. No, that's fine. If you want to posit an untrustworthy God, that's fine. But going back to objective morality, if we are getting our standard of objectivity from God, we should probably be able to trust him. He should be trustworthy. And so, again, I would say then omniscience is required because if he doesn't know everything, how can we truly trust him? And if he doesn't know everything, then how can he be unchanging? How does he know he's going to not change when he makes us that promise?
I'll address that in 1 second. We got a super chat. Thank you, Shadow. Well, here goes to the Grubhub money question for the guy with the weird afro. What century were you born in? You have a nice style there.
Oh, thanks. Um, well, 20th, or 21st, but actually 20th, 1900s. So sorry.
He's
Yep,
actually
that's all I got for
17.
you.
It's 17.
Gotcha.
But
If there's some sporadic movements on my camera, it's because my dog is sleeping on me, and she's a 60-pound lap dog. So
no problem. Yes. So
yep.
my question here is that there's a separate point here between morality and omniscience. To me, it seems like there could be a God who's all powerful, who created the universe, and it's just all powerful, omnipotence, no omniscience. It doesn't seem to need omniscience to create the universe. It can create the universe just fine. So whether or not it's trustworthy is a separate argument to whether or not you can have a God who is all powerful without being perfectly good or whatever. Like there's many gods concepts that don't need to be perfectly good. So we could just say there is no objective morality and there's a God who just isn't perfectly good, and that would solve the problem. So I don't see why you would need a God to be perfectly good. Also, you don't need a God to be all-knowing to be perfectly good. Like you could have a God who's perfectly good by nature and he doesn't tell you anything. And so you don't need to like trust what he's saying. It's just his nature that's good.
Yeah,
So
that is actually the biblical God. That's the biblical worldview. He is good in his nature. Like he is good. It's not that he
right.
does something because it's good, and it's not that something's good because he does it. It's that he is the standard. He is good.
Right. And I'm using that as an example to show that you don't need omniscience, all knowledge, to be perfectly good. You can be perfectly good even if you don't have all knowledge, because the reason God is good isn't his knowledge, it's his nature.
Uh, sure. Yeah. Um,
So you could
I'm
have a
trying to
God
figure out.
who's all powerful and all good, but still doesn't need omniscience. You don't need omniscience to have a perfectly good,
Well,
all
how
powerful
can
God.
you? Yeah, but you can't trust that he's all powerful. How can he know he's all powerful if he's not omniscient? Because for all he knows, all the God knows, he's not all powerful. There could be something more powerful than him. He's not omniscient.
Well, I don't understand the question here. So, like, how do I know he's all powerful? I don't need to know. That's an epistemology question. I'm just asking: is it
Well,
ontologically possible? Like, could there exist a God who is all powerful and perfectly good who doesn't know everything? And the answer is yes. Whether or not we know it doesn't make a difference. Like whether we could
well, no,
know he
I
exists is
sure we couldn't know he exists. Yeah, but in that case, we also would have no reason to posit that there's a God, if that's the case. If there's no way for us to know that he exists, then why would we worry about that? Uh, that this is a different thought experiment than I'm used to, so I apologize for not addressing things clearly. But yeah, what do you think?
well, to me, it seems like you're confusing epistemology and ontology. So, like, whether or not we think there's a God doesn't matter. It's irrelevant to the question. So
Correct.
imagine there were
Yeah.
no humans created in the universe yet. We're pre-human
Yeah.
era. Could there be a
Yeah.
God who created the universe who's all powerful and all good, but not all knowing? Well, yeah, like there's, of course, he's all powerful. He could definitely create the universe.
Well, but
And it
see,
wouldn't
that's
matter if he was
but
all
you're
knowing.
you're begging the question there though, because how do you know he's all powerful? Because unless he's claiming to be all powerful, you're just assuming he's all powerful. So I don't think that that works because then you run into problems with God.
So I'm asking about the problems with God part. Whether or not we know doesn't provide any problems for God. So if we know God is all powerful, versus we don't know God is all powerful, neither of those things are a problem with God's nature. There's no internal contradiction with God either way. Whether or not we exist poses no problem to God. So
Sure.
asking how do we know something is an epistemology question. It's a fallacy in philosophy known as confusing epistemology with ontology. Trying to ask how you would know something is irrelevant to the case of whether or not it's true. So the truth
I
of the
think I
statement.
I think I got it. Okay, so I'm saying that a God I'm arguing that a God cannot be omnipotent without being omniscient because um, there would be no plausible way for that to happen because you cannot be omnipotent. God could not be omnipotent without knowing that he's more powerful than everything else, because
I'm
there
not.
could be something more omnipotent. Just like if we only know God, if we only know God and the view that you're giving, if we only know the God that you're describing, there could still be a more powerful God out there unless something that knows everything tells us there's not. So I would agree that us knowing something is separate, but I don't think that it works saying there's something all powerful without knowing if there's something more powerful, because then saying all powerful becomes subjective.
Uh, could something be all powerful and not know it? Like, could it be the most powerful thing in the universe and just not know it?
Um, I will say I will just concede with I'm not sure,
So like,
because my knee jerk response is, well, no, well, I think that's logically consistent, but something is holding me back, and I'm not sure what. So I don't want to just concede and say, well, yes, that's true, because this is honestly a line of thinking I haven't thought about much, and I'm enjoying it, but I don't want to sit here for 5 minutes and not say anything. So I don't want to also say something that in 5 minutes I'm going to regret saying, if that
well,
makes sense.
that's fine. So I wouldn't ever hold that against you to change your mind, but I would just say that from my perspective, there would be no problem with a being that is the most powerful being who could do anything in the universe. And even if it doesn't know it, it could still be the case that it's the most powerful being. So even if it doesn't know, it's still the most powerful being, whether or not it knows it. So I don't think the fact that it knows it's the most powerful being would change the fact of the
Well,
universe that it is the most powerful being.
if you're basing this on the premise of it's the most powerful being in the universe, well, sure, that could be um, tangible, but that doesn't explain what the claim of God God being supernatural, which is outside of this universe.
Oh, apologize. Because of I'm a naturalist, universe means everything to me. So reality. So if there's the being that's the most powerful being in all of reality, whether or not it knows it's the most powerful being in all of reality doesn't change the fact that it is the most powerful being in all of reality. So whether or not it knows doesn't seem to affect its place in reality. Either it is the most powerful or it's not the most powerful, and that statement is true regardless of whether or not it knows it.
If something is just claiming to be most powerful, I think that's fine. But if something is claiming to be absolutely all powerful, I don't think it works.
How so? How does
Um,
if a being is all powerful, either it is all powerful or it isn't all powerful, and that statement is true regardless of whether or not the being knows it.
something can be perfectly powerful, but not have the power to know something, not have the capability to look into something.
I don't know what that means. So like power to know something does not make sense to me. Power is like the ability to create, to bend space time. It's like an actionable thing. It's not like a knowledge
So
thing.
are you saying that it can do that without knowledge then? So could something be all powerful and have absolutely no thought?
Yes.
Um, right, but I
Like God could be sleeping or something. Like just God's unconscious and he has no thought. He's still all powerful, right? But he's just unconscious.
well, no, because if he needs to sleep, he's not that powerful.
Well, he doesn't need
Um,
to sleep, but he could choose to sleep. He could choose to put himself to sleep or whatever. So he could be unconscious, but he's still all powerful. He's an all powerful
if he
being.
if he entered into this world, he could, but I don't think so. Going back to my thought experiment of does God think? That's like God is. God said, I am. God is unchanging. And so the question of thinking requires an elapse of time for processes of thought to go from one leg to another leg. But if God is outside of time, then that would support, or that would be coherent with being omniscient, because the process of thinking, the process of coming to conclusions never happens with God, because he knows everything all the time, right now and forever. And that's not a contradiction, that's a paradox. It's something that we, because we are limited by our logic, we assume God's limited by logic. We're not actually sure if he is, but it makes sense that he is. Um, and so I don't think we can hold him to the same standard as we can hold ourselves.
Well, that's your conception of a god, but I don't see any problem with a kind of a god who could sleep, or a kind of a God who has a mind or changes. I don't see a problem with the changing God at all. So it seems to me that there's no problem with the idea of a God who has a mind, kind of like ours, who can sleep if he chooses to, and is still all powerful. So it could still be an all powerful being with like a human kind of a mind who just sleeps, chooses to sleep. Like I don't see a logical problem. There's no logical contradiction with that.
Um, I would have to get back to you on, if we are going outside of what God is, that's fine. But uh, again, I am coming at this from a actually, I understand why you're making the point that you're making, because obviously you're trying to level an argument that's equally as valid that isn't my worldview. Um, so I get that, but I think that an omniscient, omnipresent, omnipotent being would be a better explanation than yours. So I'm not sure if yours is logically plausible. It could be. I haven't thought about it much, but I would say that mine would be logically make more sense.
Super chat from Johnny one, Johnny Ona Music. Johnny Ona Music. He said God would not need to have sleep, but didn't God need to rest on the sixth day after creating the universe?
He rested. And again, just like God can't change, God did not need to rest, but he instilled a pattern for his creation as soon as he was done creating it. And he instilled that pattern in Israel. And he actually still encourages that pattern, even though we're not bound by the law of Israel and whatnot. But that's a separate topic. So, no, God didn't need to rest, just like God cannot change his mind. But he gave us examples of patterns that he explained himself in a way that we can understand.
All right, so going back to the question, you said that your idea of a god is a more plausible explanation of the universe. I don't understand how yours is more plausible than mine. That's the argument here, is that it seems to me that the alternative model I'm presenting is equally as plausible an explanation as your model. That's the point I'm trying to make, is that it seems like that you've adopted this model because you like it the best, but I don't see any logical or evidential reason to prefer yours over the one I'm presenting.
Well, when did yours start?
You mean when did I come up with the idea, or when did the being hypothetically begin to exist? Because if it didn't, it's a necessary being that's
Well, if
always
it,
existed.
but sure, hypothetically, when did your all-powerful being, who isn't all-knowing, who can sleep, begin to exist, and how did whatever you would call it, um, I'm not sure that that would work, because if you do not have the power to know what is going to intervene with the universe that you've created, I'm not sure that you can be all powerful, because if you're all powerful, you can prevent things before they happen. But if you can't know what's going to happen, then you can't prevent them. So there is a limit to your power.
I don't quite follow that. Like, I don't think the power to know something seems like a contradiction in terms to me. It seems like a square root of a pork chop. Like, you don't, the power to know something just seems like, is it possible for you to have a brain state to understand the concept? But I
Well,
don't.
you mentioned logical um, logical lines of thinking. If we were talking about superpowers, could you have the power of knowing everything? Seems pretty logical that that could be a power.
It could be like a superpower, but that wouldn't be literal power.
Uh, sure. So I think that in order to actually be all powerful and to have the ability to use that all powerfulness, you would also have to be omniscient. Otherwise, again, I don't think that you can be all powerful and say, well, I have the power to prevent anything, even though I don't know that anything is coming. So anything could come and surprise me, but somehow I have the power to prevent it, even though I don't know it's coming. So you could address it once it gets here, but you can't prevent it. You don't have that power because you don't know what's coming.
Doc Palermo, not thank you for the super chat. A transcendental being must be timeless and cannot know propositions about the past and future, but such a being must know these propositions, so it is impossible for a transcendental being to be omniscient.
Says who?
Well, he's saying that if a being is unchanging, then it can't know facts, because knowing facts requires time.
I disagree. I explain that through God's being, he doesn't change. Through God's, I don't think that God thinks. I think we can understand him as a mind, but I don't think he thinks because he already knows everything all at once, all at the same time. It's the knowledge is always there. It's always been there and it will always be there. The universe he's created is based on a timeline. God is not based on a timeline. He's outside of time.
Okay, so back to the point, mine would be is that I don't see any contradiction with, like, you asked earlier, can there be an all-powerful being that has no consciousness? I would say yes. Like, there could be just a field, an infinite field that has energy to create everything. And it's a kind of like a quantum field that emits things randomly or whatever, or has a nature to emit certain patterns or whatever. And it has infinite energy, so it's all powerful. It could create or destroy everything, but it has no knowledge. So I don't see a logical contradiction with this. I don't see any connection between omnipotence and omniscience in that you need knowledge to have all powerful. You could be all powerful to create everything, infinite universes, whatever, just fine without any kind of knowledge. Or you don't need to know anything about the future. You don't need to prevent anything about the future. It's just if you have the infinite knowledge that makes you able to do all of those things, your omnipotence, regardless of whether or not you have the knowledge to act on those possibilities.
I don't think that I did get a bit lost with that.
Okay, so
Sorry, I do apologize.
no problem. So, the way I see it is I don't see any logical contradiction with a being, like being in philosophy just means an object that exists, a being all powerful, like a field, like a quantum field, who is all powerful. So it's omnipotent, has enough energy to create or destroy everything infinitely many times over, but it has no knowledge. So it can't look into the future and say, a ball is going to hit the earth or whatever and then prevent it, because it has the power to do so. If it knew or had this desire, it could absolutely have the power to change this, but it doesn't have any knowledge. So it's still all powerful because it has the power to be able to do anything, regardless of whether or not it has the knowledge or consciousness or desires to act on that power. So the only thing that seems to be required for omnipotence is that it has the ability to do anything, regardless of whether or not it knows or desires to do anything. So there could be an all-powerful entity that does nothing.
Right, but so right, because it chooses to do nothing. I don't think you can have an all-powerful thing that doesn't have the ability. Apologize, that was my cats. I don't think you can have an all-powerful thing that then doesn't have the power to do anything because it does nothing.
What?
That seems to be a contradiction.
Wait, I'm not sure what you mean by doesn't have. Like, if it has the power to do it but doesn't, it still has the power. Like a battery that's charged, it's full of energy. It's just not doing anything with the energy. Thank you for the super chat, Matthew.
So it's choosing not to do something.
No, like if it has no consciousness, it's just literally not doing anything, but it has the energy within it to do everything.
Well, I think we're getting into this weird, a weird realm where we're not. It's almost a non sequitur because the God that I'm positing it wouldn't be bound by that kind. I think it's how you said power or words have a certain difference in meaning. God being omnipotent and all powerful means things. He has the power to do things physical as well as non-physical. Um, but
I'd
I'm
be happy to agree with that. Like this field could have that same power to do things both physically and non-physically.
right. But a field is bound by something. An omnipotent, omnipresent, omniscient being is not bound by something.
I don't know what you mean there. So I don't know what you mean by bound something. If it's the essence that grounds all of existence, it's not bound by anything. It is everything.
Um, the essence that grounds all of existence.
Yeah. So like, in
Well,
fields, like in
sure.
physics,
Yeah,
it's
got I right. I think you're missing a few things, but yeah. Um,
well, that's what I say. What a field is. Like fields are the things that ground all existence. So it would make sense that a field was the things that ground all existence.
but how does a field do that?
I don't know what you mean here. Fields are literally the stuff that makes everything else up.
Right. So I think this is just where my ignorance comes into this. Um, a field is something that explain that. Explain how you're using field.
In physics, a field is the substance that makes up everything in the universe. It literally is the smallest constituent part that makes everything that exists.
Okay, right. So that works for a universe, but then you'd have to go back to origins. If we're going to talk about stuff that's in our universe, where did the universe come from?
The
Because I think
fields.
that the trouble is where it seems like you're trying to get me to argue for God inside of the universe because your use of the word universe means everything, but by definition, my use of the word everything means outside of the universe. So I think the problem is we're arguing on different objective terms or on different terms or on different foundational terms here.
Right. So
Because
so I
if
would I
yeah,
would argue that God isn't the most fundamental thing that grounds everything. Fields are. Fields are the most fundamental thing that ground everything, and our universe was a result, an emergent result of those fields. So space and time in physics, the consensus is space and time are emergent from other fields that existed independently of space and time. So there are these other fields that existed before the universe and created the universe. And so these fields have existed necessarily with outside of space and time. They've always been there.
sure, and you can empirically prove that.
There's more evidence for it than there is for a god, that's for sure. Like all of the
Empirical
fields,
evidence or philosophical?
both.
Okay, well, what's some empirical evidence for it?
Sure, the combinations of the theory of the fields is all things that have been demonstrated to exist. So, for example, the field
Theory?
for string theory, which is one of the things, is a combination of two different principles in physics. One is the vacuum particles, which have been demonstrated in the Casimir effect. The other is the early universal inflation, which was demonstrated empirically in observations of the cosmic microwave background. If you combine those two principles, you get the fields of string theory. And so all of the pieces to that theory have been empirically demonstrated, even though the combination isn't. That means it's a better hypothesis than the God hypothesis because none of the pieces of the God hypothesis have been demonstrated to exist, whereas all of the pieces of this hypothesis have been demonstrated to exist. And so it's more plausible anytime in science if a hypothesis is only using pieces that have been proven to exist. It's a better hypothesis than one that adds in pieces that have no evidence that they exist.
Hmm, interesting. Well, so it seems like you're having to trace backwards, though. Like you can see what's there, but you're having to trace backwards to get to origins
Isn't
in
that what
one way or another.
isn't that what you always have to do for every hypothesis? Like I don't know of another way to do it.
Well, sure, you can make a hypothesis, but then you're not using empirical evidence. If it's just a hypothesis or a theory, like we call things falling and being attracted to the earth gravity, but the theory of gravity isn't a thing, it's a theory. It's not a tangible thing, it's a theory of gravity. It's describing something empirical that we can drop something, it falls. That's empirical evidence. I can show that.
I'm lost a little bit. So a theory is a combination of things, and the combination of things is a set of facts and a set of laws, and all of the facts and laws are empirically demonstrated. So a theory is a collection of demonstrated empirical facts and laws.
And probably partnered in with assumptions and other theories. I mean,
Yes,
I don't, right.
it depends
So,
on the theory. So there's lots of different theories.
right. Like you can, take, you can take anything you want that is a fact and yoke that to a theory that makes a bunch of assumptions, and that theory can be completely wrong.
Right.
So string theory could be wrong. Sure, it's looking at things that exists, but that doesn't mean that string theory is correct. It just means that's how it's interpreting this data.
Right. But I'm saying that this is a more reasonable theory to accept because all of the pieces in it have been demonstrated to exist. So, like, if I have one theory that um, thunder is caused by friction between particles in the atmosphere, that all of the pieces in that theory have been demonstrated to exist. But if I said thunder is caused by a magical guy named Zeus or something, or a magical leprechaun, now I'm adding in things to the theory which have no basis in reality. The magical Zeus guy, the magical fairy, whatever. And so
For
the better
sure.
theory
Yeah.
is the one that's only made of parts that have already been demonstrated. Even if the combination hasn't been, each of the parts have been, and so it's a better theory. So the same thing would apply to string theory. String theory has all of the parts in the theory have been demonstrated: Casimir effect, early universe inflation, cosmic microwave background radiation. So those have been demonstrated to exist. Those are real things we empirically verify. And if we combine those things and we think the same principles that cause both of those are intertwined in some way, it results in the string theory. And we haven't proven that they are combined in that way. But because both of the pieces have been demonstrated, that's a better theory than saying it's caused by Zeus or caused by magic or caused by God, because those are adding in parts that haven't been demonstrated to exist yet.
Um, so sure, but I could also say that not sure as in I agree, but sure as in I'm coming down a train of thought of just because you know that lightning exists and you understand how lightning works, that does disprove Zeus if Zeus claims to be the one throwing the lightning bolts, but it doesn't disprove God because God doesn't claim to be throwing lightning bolts. He claims to be the one that's in control of all matter, of everything, of his creation, and he's outside of it. Zeus
I
is
think
in his creation,
I
and
think I
in the
think you might
way,
have missed the point there. So the point is, imagine we don't know what causes lightning. Imagine we're living 1,000 years ago and we have no idea what causes lightning. We just see lightning. We don't know what causes it. And one person is
sure,
coming up with a hypothesis that lightning is caused by particles rubbing together, creating friction. And now
yeah,
imagine we know about particles, we know about friction, so these are things we know exist.
yeah,
And so he's saying, I think lightning is caused by only a combination of things we know exist. And somebody else was coming along and said, no, I think it's Zeus and magic and stuff. And if we have no evidence of Zeus and magic, he's just adding in things that we don't know about to his theory. So he has a
yeah,
theory that's built on things that have no supporting evidence, whereas this other guy has a theory built on things that are all supported by evidence. So the guy who has
yeah.
a theory that's built on things with only supporting evidence is a better theory. And that's what I'm saying here is string theory, is that all of the pieces have supporting evidence: Casimir effect, cosmic microwave background radiation, early universe inflation. Those things haven't been empirically demonstrated to exist. So all of the pieces to this theory have supporting evidence, whereas all of the pieces of the God theory do not have supporting evidence.
Let's So I cannot argue that level of cosmology with you, uh, or string theory. But let's go with the lightning one because I'm able to appreciate where that's at, and I think that's on my level. The other stuff's over my head. Um, so God says that we're not supposed to have false gods. We're not supposed to take the natural and worship it. We shouldn't have ever created Zeus because it's very obvious that Zeus is fallible. But based on who God claims to be, he's fully compatible with our understanding of thunder and lightning. In fact, we're just figuring out how he created his creation. It in no way disproves God, and it doesn't. Lightning does not in itself prove God. Just as lightning, you have to partner in logic and thought with it. But certainly, us understanding how something works does not deny its creator. And I
Uh,
would actually argue that if you chance, because when you, again, going back to my event horizon thing, lightning is something that is so complex as well as everything that is so complex. So I guess it's, what is that, the teleological argument kind of thing of creation is so complex and there are so many variables, that it points to God. And people really don't like the watchmaker theory, but the problem with the watchmaker theory is it stops at the watch because we're talking about humans. But in the watchmaker theory, God not only created the human who created the watch, he also created the sand on the beach where the watch was found. And so analogies can't be perfect. So the watchmaker analogy can't be perfect, but it gets the point across. And I think that that is good evidence for God. It's just been around so long, people are like, oh, well, we're tired of talking about that.
Okay, thanks for the super chat, Marty. Quantum theory is empirically tested to 10 parts in a billion accuracy. How much empirical evidence does exist for God?
Um, well, I've already said I'm not sure I can make an empirical argument outside of myself. Anybody can test the claims of God themselves, and when you do that, you can't just say, "Okay, God, I'm here. Give me this," because if you read Scripture, it says that's not how God works. If you have a understanding of how God is, well, then you can enter into that relationship with Him, and that's what it is. God's not just a dictator, not just a dictator. He's not a
not
dictator.
not just a
Um,
dictator.
not just a dictator, because you can have a relationship with a dictator. It's just not a very good one. God is not a dictator. He is our creator. He's our father. That's how he describes himself as. So he wants to engage in a relationship with us. I don't know how I got into that tangent. Where was that question even at?
He asked how much
Oh,
empirical evidence was for God,
I'm
and
I'm yeah, I'm not trying to prove God empirically. I can speak on my own experience, and then I can talk about uh, theological and biblical topics. But I'm not going to be able to say, well, let me drop this rock and show you that gravity is well supported. I can't do something and show you God. And as far as the string theory comment, again, I that's oversight. That's outside of something that I've studied.
right. Okay, so I'll try to simplify it. So my point about the thunder wasn't that thunder disproves God. Like that's not the point. The point is that if you have
Yeah.
an unknown phenomenon, let's change it to say we have a footprint in the snow. There's a footprint in the snow, and we don't know what caused the footprint in the snow. Now, before we know the answer, the better theory is the one that only uses combinations of things that have already been demonstrated to exist. So, like if we say a horse caused a footprint in the snow, that's reasonable. But if somebody said a unicorn, that would not be reasonable because there's no evidence of unicorns. So, if we want to explain some phenomenon we don't know about yet, the better theory is the one that only uses combinations of things we already know about. Is that fair?
Yeah, but so again, we have to go outside of the analogy a little bit to get to God, um, because in that we don't know what caused the footprint, but we know whatever caused the footprint was created by God. So if someone said, "I believe in God because I believe in God," it was a unicorn, and then we figure out it was a horse, that doesn't disprove God. That just shows us we had a false understanding of how God created the thing that we're interpreting. So same with thunder. We shouldn't even have had the false god to begin with, and we can say, well, it just happens because I clap or something. But us understanding how thunder works gives us a better understanding of how God created his universe. And yeah, I'll
Well,
leave that
well,
there.
so in this case, the hoof print would be what is the fundamental thing that created everything? That's the question we're asking. So, if we don't know what the fundamental thing that created everything is, a better hypothesis is one that's a combination of things that we have evidence for than making up things we don't have evidence for. So, like, say the origin of everything. That's like the footprint. We don't know what caused it, but string theory is a better explanation of that because it's a combination of things that we have empirical evidence for. But saying magical leprechaun would be a bad hypothesis because it's combining, adding in things we don't have evidence for. So it seems to
So
me, go ahead.
do you believe that everything can be tested in a lab and understood tangibly?
No, not yet, at least. Maybe in the future.
well, right. So um, it, I think that your worldview, at least from what it seems to me, is squeezing out the possibility of supernatural or metaphysics because you are trying to explain everything from a natural position. And so, because you're coming at this from that angle, you're saying, well, these natural explanations, what we can observe, what we can see, these are better explanations, even though we might be making assumptions, we don't know everything about them. We don't necessarily have empirical evidence to support the entire theory. We have a couple things that we can look at. That's better because it doesn't imply supernatural or metaphysical items. But the problem is, if God exists, we should be looking for those things and they would be fully consistent with him.
I'm not sure I follow that. So, for example, I'm not eliminating supernatural here. I'm saying that Only using combination of things we already know about is better, which we currently only know about physical things. But if we did discover a supernatural thing, then it would be equally as reasonable to use in the thing that we use to build hypotheses along with the natural things. So my position is that once we demonstrate something, like in order to show that something is real, we have to have some methodology we can use to differentiate real things from imaginary things. It's just something we made up in our head. Novel testable predictions is the way I do that. So if you said, I believe in a non-physical being named Bob who lives in my basement, and every time I ask Bob, he will give me a gold brick, and then we go down to the basement and say, Bob, give me a brick, and he gives you a gold brick, and say, do it again, Bob, give me another gold brick, and he gives you another gold brick. That's evidence of Bob. We now have good evidence of a supernatural being named Bob who gives people gold bricks. So we could now say, if there was a gold brick that appeared in our backyard, maybe that was Bob, and that would be perfectly reasonable because we already have evidence Bob exists. But we couldn't say it was a leprechaun because we don't have any evidence of leprechauns. We could go with Bob because Bob we know exists. We could go with Bill Gates because Bill Gates exists. Bill Gates just dropped a gold brick there because he's crazy. Either of those would be better hypotheses than leprechaun because we have no evidence of leprechauns yet. So this doesn't exclude the supernatural, but would you agree that if we have evidence of some things, those things are better things to use when we're trying to explain something we don't understand than adding in new things we don't know about yet?
I think God, I think evidence, I'm sorry, I got started on a thought track that sparked in that conversation. So I think we have to consider what evidence means. So let's just ignore, for the sake of argument, all of the biblical contradictions that you could come up with that we could discuss. And I'm sure I wouldn't have answers for all of them, but I might have answers for some of them. The Bible makes some pretty incredible psychological assumptions that we could test, and it might not be assumption; it might actually be how humanity operates. And we could test that. Is this how humanity operates? And so what it seems to me is, let's say that you've got Bob in your basement dropping those gold bricks. Is that going to convince everybody that Bob exists?
Should it? Yes, that would be
No,
reasonable for
will it?
people. Well, obviously, no. People won't. People are flat earthers. There's nothing that's going to convince them.
Right. Um, well, yeah,
Like,
sheesh.
do you think you can
Anyway,
convince Nathan ever? Like, if we brought him to space, Nathan Thompson, is he going to believe the world's flat? He's like, no.
well, to be frank, I don't think Nathan believes the world is flat. I think he may have genuinely had some good inquiries and some good points in the beginning, but then I think because of his personality, his demeanor, and how aggressive he was, he gained some popularity. And by the time all the cogs clicked, he did not want to turn from that. Um, Now, I can't actually say that for sure, but that is my theory because Nathan seems pretty smart. And especially when I argued him, I just thought, I, I have trouble believing he believes it. I do.
but I mean, you would agree
Anyway,
that there are some people who aren't going to change their mind no matter what. They're just so dogmatic in what they believe. They're just never going to change
right.
their mind.
Right. So you're saying though it would be good evidence, better evidence, if we could have Bob dropping those golden bricks. But the problem is that that's good evidence as long as you think it's good evidence. And so I don't think God even tries to empirically prove himself. He already did. Take Israel for example. He was a pillar of if it happened. He was a pillar of fire by night, or yeah, by night, and a pillar of cloud by day. And the people, Israel, who he parted the Red Sea and let go through it, if that's true, they still denied him. They still said, who is God? They still built the golden calf. So God seems to understand very well that an empirical argument is not going to win over humanity. And so it almost seems like you're holding God to a standard that God knows he's not going to even hold himself to. Humanity's not going to, that's, we are still going to find a way around it because of sin. And that could just be saying, whatever, like, I don't believe it. The earth is flat, like that, Um,
Marty, thanks for the super chat. If God knows all, then we cannot do anything other than what God knows. Is God not deterministic?
Uh, yeah, well, I don't. I'm not 100% sure of the definition for deterministic, but he
Means
is
determined
sovereign.
by, like, it's the free will thing. So if God knows everything we're going to
Yeah,
do, then we
right.
have no free will.
No, that right. I disagree with that. And that's a pretty deep theological topic. But I would agree that God knows what we're going to do, but I'd also agree that we still have responsibility in the fact that we do it. And just because he knows something, I can write a computer program and know what that computer program is going to do, but I'm not the one doing the computer program. The computer program does that. That analogy can't be perfect because God is sovereign. I am not sovereign, but that can just say, I can know exactly what my computer program is going to do, even though I am not controlling the computer program. It is doing its own thing, operating under its own design.
Thank you for the super chat, Brute Facts Podcast. If young Earth creationism is false, is God existing also false?
No, I'm comfortable with an old Earth. I think that both sides are reasonable, but that's the thing. I think that the reasonable. I think there are some things in the old Earth model that are more assumed than actually empirically verifiable, and so yeah, I'll leave that there.
Okay,
But no,
so
God's existence does not depend on evolution. God's existence does not depend on the age of the Earth. Um, yeah, I think we need to be a little more open to discussion on some topics.
okay, so we were talking about what is evidence. How would you define evidence? Because the way I define evidence is anything that can differentiate imagination from reality.
It seems like a good one.
So in that case, like, in the example of Bob giving the gold bricks, that would be good evidence because it's a novel testable prediction. If God exists or if Bob, not God, if Bob exists and Bob gives us gold bricks, when we pray or when we ask him to, that's good evidence of Bob. So that is a very good
Sure.
way to give a reason to think that Bob is not imaginary and is in fact a real thing. So it seems like the gold bricks example would count as evidence. It may not be the only way, it's just an example, but anything that
Yeah,
can
I
differentiate imagination from reality would count as evidence.
let's say that Bob said, um, he fits all your criteria. Ask me for a gold brick, I'll give it to you. But he puts in the preface, but you have to trust me first, that I will do what I say. You can't just ask it. You have to trust and believe that I will do it. And if you don't, I won't. Um, because again, God is not a genie. God is a a relationship to be had. He's a being that we can have a relationship with. And so God does not operate under, well, God, give me a gold brick because you said so. God said, well, these things will happen if you are trusting me because this is how I designed the world. If we think of existence as a computer program, it's been infected with a virus known as sin. God is the one who knows all of the fixes to all of the bugs. And so the longer we're engaging with him, the more bugs we are going to be able to either circumvent or overcome. But as long as we're rejecting him, we're not even going to be aware of the things that we have to deal with.
Okay, but like the Bob example isn't saying God must do this. This is just an example of what counts as evidence. So anything that counts as
Sure.
like novel prediction is
But
evidence.
but if Bob says, but you must trust me first, that would still count as evidence.
Yeah. So like
He's
if
still
you
got, yeah.
so like say I don't trust Bob, but you do trust Bob, and you ask Bob and he gives you a gold brick every time. I ask Bob, I get nothing. That's still evidence. Like you're still getting a gold brick every time. Something is happening here. That's
Right.
still evidence.
And that goes back to my peace example that surpasses all understanding. That's what God is claiming.
What
In that Philippians passage is for his believers. And that's the point. It it you can't just say, well, God give me because God's God. He doesn't bend the knee to us. He says, when you understand who I am and engage in that relationship, these are some things that I have promised you you can expect.
So my point with the gold, my objection to your peace example is that peace isn't something we can measure. It's just we can't see it or test it to show who has more peace. Gold we can test to see. Like if I pray to Bob and I don't trust Bob, I get nothing, no gold brick. You pray to
Correct.
Bob, you get a gold brick. We can see it's working for you, it's not working for me. You're doing something right, I'm doing something wrong. But if
What
for
if
the
you can't
peace
see it?
example, it's like if I pray, if I don't trust Bob, I can still say I'm getting the ultimate peace. And you can say no, I trust Bob, I'm getting the ultimate peace, but there's no way to tell the difference between us. There has to be something like a gold brick where we can say this guy's doing it right, this guy's doing it wrong.
Well, what if you can't see the gold brick? What if it's only Bob in my basement with the person trusting him, and Bob in your basement? Because Bob could be in anyone's basement at any time.
Yeah.
So what if you can't see when he gives me the brick?
Then it wouldn't be
Does that
evidence.
mean it's not real?
Yes, that would mean it's an anecdote. So you have to be able to verify it independently of your personal experience, or it could just be like a delusion, right? So you need some way to verify it independently of your own subjective experience. That's kind of the point of the. You need some way to differentiate imagination from
Well,
reality. If you're the only one experiencing it, well, then that doesn't tell you it's not imaginary. You need to be able to show it's not just something you're experiencing.
um, right. But then if I brought you a gold brick, if I showed you, if I was peaceful, if that fruit was shown in me the same way I could show you that gold brick and I said, this is how it happened because this is how Bob operates. I'm showing you the product, telling you how it happened. It's up to you if you want to believe it or not. And if you trust it will happen, if you trust Bob, you'll get the result. But as long as you don't trust Bob, as long as you think that gold brick was imaginary, how I got it was imaginary, Bob's never going to give it to you. And so you see, just like how they don't believe in gravity, and so that prevents them from understanding how it works. If you will not accept, if you will not trust that God exists to give you the thing, then he doesn't promise to give it to you.
Right. So if we could like show that a higher rate of Christians get this ultimate peace thingy than others do, and a higher rate of Christians have better lives in this more peaceful lives or whatever, then that would be evidence. But we just don't see that. We don't. That doesn't show up in statistics when we look at it. So
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing. I don't know actually if it shows up in statistics. I would say that it probably does actually show up in statistics. I'm pretty confident in that. I don't have anything to say for sure, but I would be confident in that. But anyway, I think that the problem with statistics in every regard is when you throw humans into it, you get problems. People can lie. I mean, so many people can go to church and not be Christians. I mean, the Bible even warns against people who go to church and are not actually Christians. They don't actually know God. They don't care about God, but they do all the things so they can check the box. Yeah, I'm a Christian because from your guys' perspective, I look like one, but I'm actually not. So I think that there's a lot of trouble with actually having a comprehensive study that can show that. But what can happen is you can have someone's individual testimony show that, and then you can test what they're saying. But you can't say, because I refuse to meet one of the premises for this test, it can't be valid.
Doc Polermonot, thanks for the super chat. What justification do you have for infallibility of creation accounts given scholarly consensus and mimetic ripoffs of Sumerian myths?
Repeat that.
What justification do you have for the infallibility of creation accounts given scholarly consensus of mimetic ripoffs of Sumerian myths?
That's to say the trouble with anyone in any profession is you can get a professional who really knows what he's talking about, who tells the truth, and a professional who really knows what he's talking about, who lies, or a professional who doesn't know what he's talking about and says he does, or one that does and then doesn't say what he does know. And so all of that is just to say, same thing with statistics. I would almost say, yeah, we must not make arguments based on consensus of the masses, if that makes sense. Consensus of certain groups of scholars. I think we have to be very careful with that. I think there's areas we can do that, but the problem is anything that involves theology, you're going to have trouble with empirically. I think I'm going off on a tangent, so before I get any
That's
further
fine.
into that, I think I'll leave it there.
All right. Snake was right. Thank you for the super chat. I don't trust anyone who has nothing to show other than trust me, which is what every religion says.
Well, I wouldn't say every religion says that, because I'm saying trust yourself. Go test it yourself. If you're saying you don't have the ability to trust God, and God is saying you need to trust me, then that's not God's fault and it's not mine.
All right, so going back to that point, imagine you were able to check the stats, and the stats showed that Christians do not have a higher level of peace than atheists do. Would that lower your confidence level in Christianity?
No, because to be frank, in a lot of Christian circles that I know, the Christians don't actually understand God. Christians are not, you can't know God if you're not in the Word, because that's God's Word to us. And so many Christians are struggling with things because they're going against God because they don't know what God actually says. And so, of course, they're not going to have peace because the God they're claiming to have a relationship, they're slapping in the face every day. And God's like, hey, I love you. Would you read my book? And they're like, well, I assume I know what's going on, so I'm not going to read your book. And I'm depressed.
So, what would lower your confidence or cause you to change your mind or cause you to doubt in, like, what would it take for you to see that would cause you to doubt that the Christian narrative was correct?
That the Christian worldview is correct, or to doubt that it's correct. Well, I doubt all the time. It's There's nothing wrong with doubting. In fact, God wants you to explore what's true. Um, he only wants you to know what's true if he exists. If he doesn't exist, well, then I'm off the hook from God.
I mean, more specifically,
Um,
like, what would cause you to stop believing in Christianity?
I don't know.
Okay. Um, the
Yeah,
dork shot.
God knows. But the trouble is, God, God makes the claim that I cannot lose those who are mine, and those who aren't mine, they can't become mine. So if God wants me, He's got me, and there's nothing anyone can do to turn me from that. But even if I outwitted you in every single argument possible, tomorrow I could go through a tragic event that is just very hard for me, and I could denounce my faith because God allows that to be the stumbling block. So I don't actually know. And I think it's biblically consistent to say, I'm not sure what would turn me from God, just like I'm not sure what would turn you to God. Do you know what would turn you to God
Yep.
by
Novel
chance? What
testable
would make,
predictions.
well, sure. Um, so if God is saying, well, my word is novel and testable, and if you trust it and do what it says, again, genuinely trusting it, genuinely believing in Him, which would be a requirement there, then couldn't you do that? You might
Yes.
not be able to show anyone else, but you could.
Well, no, for me, novel testable predictions mean it has to be independent of yourself, because if it doesn't, the whole point of evidence is it has to show it's not imaginary. So if it's just my subjective experience, that doesn't show it's not imaginary. It has to be objectively shown to be independent of my subjective anecdotal experience. So
Yeah, but I
that's
think
important.
I don't think. So are you saying subjective experience, as in all experiences can have a um, they can be subjective to going on, but if I'm happy, happiness is a subjective thing because it can come or go. But if I'm happy, I'm objectively happy because I'm happy. Like, I am happy. That's an objective fact that I'm happy right now,
Yep.
right? The fact that it can change means that happiness itself is subjective,
Yep.
right? So I'm not sure how what you just said doesn't seem to line up with that.
So the causation is the question here. Am I happy because I was with God, or am I happy because of some non-God related mental state? And so if we want to show that I am, yes, it is true that I am happy because I turned to God and it wasn't just random chance, then you have to show that as more than just something in my head. It has to be something we can verify independently of my subjective experience, because it could just be I'm happy because I had a brain tumor that sent me a bunch of dopamine at the same time I prayed or whatever. So you have to
Yeah, but
show that it's
that means you're
what?
denying the claim being made. If God is claiming that if you believe in me and trust in me, you'll have peace that surpasses understanding, and then you do that, and then you get that peace, but then you say, well, it can't be God. Um, I don't see how that works, because God's saying this is what's going to happen. So then if it keeps happening, peace can come and go. And because we're in a sinful world, even that peace can come and go because we're in sin. We're not in glory yet. But the fact that a claim is made and then it can be tested, that would be evidence. And it would be evidence you could
No.
trust.
So it's like in science, this happens all the time. If I think this particle is the cause of some phenomenon and we do an experiment and we expect to see a result and we see a result, that doesn't prove that it's the particle, because it could have been something else we didn't understand that caused the effect. In order to know that it was in fact the particle you think it was, you have to independently verify it. Other people have to verify it, because it could just be your machinery. Your machinery might be broken, which happened in the tachyon thing in Japan, where the Japanese thought they had tachyons that went faster than the speed of light. Other people verified it. They built the same machine. They did the same experiment, realized, nope, it doesn't get the same result, which means it was a problem with the machinery that the Japanese did. And so when they went back, they're like, oh, our machines are broken. That's our fault. So the same thing could be happening in the psychological case, where when I pray to God, I get the feeling of ultimate peace, but it could be my machinery's broken. I could have a tumor in my brain that I don't know about. And so if I think just my experience is evidence, that's an anecdotal fallacy. You need some other people to be able to verify this independently of your subjective experience, to verify that it's not just your broken machinery. So that's why science requires independent confirmation. That's why you can't just have an anecdote.
I agree. I mean, there are lots of people who genuinely trust God who would say that they get peace that surpasses understanding. I mean, there are lots of people who could say that. So how big of a test group do you want?
Well, it needs to show it's higher than chance. That's...
Well, so I would say that you're going to have an outstanding result if you have people who are genuinely trusting God and taking him at his word. But as soon as you add in people who are wavering or people who aren't trusting God, well, that kind of goes against what the claim is.
Right, and you would need to show some methodology where you can differentiate between the true Christians and the false Christians. So, like, this is a good point. Super Chat, thank you, the Dork Shop. Who are the true Christians, and what must true Christians believe?
The true Christians are anyone who believe in Jesus Christ and God for who he says he is, and also understand who they are. So humanity's fallen, we're sinful. God is holy, righteously perfect. Jesus died for our sins. And so when we understand that whole combination of things and accept it, it leads to repentance. Repentance is a natural side effect of accepting who we are. So it's accepting the truth that God has given us, that Jesus has died for us, that we are fallen, that we are sinful. That's what a true Christian is. Now, whether or not you can see that or actually trust a statistic, that's a whole separate topic.
Well, that's the whole topic. That's the thing you need to demonstrate to have evidence. Like, if you can't actually demonstrate which ones are the true Christians and which ones are the false Christians, then you don't actually have any real evidence. You have to be able to...
Well, so we started off talking about morality, and I started off saying that God is an objective basis for morality because he's unchanging. And then we diverted somehow. Now we got to this, and I would agree that my experience cannot convince you unless you want to believe what I'm saying. But I'm saying that your experience, and then your experience partnered with, hey, can you try this and tell me what you experience? That could be a way of testing it. But that being said, I don't think the argument from personal experience is a very good one. That's just a testimony. So I apologize if I was building up to something greater with the argument from experience.
Okay. Jackson Rowe, thanks for the super chat. Good luck with the Hovind debate. Thank you. I will definitely need it. Jay Schneider, thank you for the super chat. Pain just literally to hear about your first thoughts on your adventure. Jacked up my adventure. Oh, yeah. Jay Schneider made a compilation video of me doing a debate with Darth Dawkins and Godless Girl. It was very hilarious. Check it out on my channel. It's a throwback parody to previous games. And thank you, Matthew Lanza, for the super chat image for the noob thing. So going back to what you said, I think that I wanted to ask you about, you said you didn't know what would convince you to deny Christianity. Like, the reason I ask that is because if you have a methodology or an evidence, you would say that what would convince you to change your mind is something that would qualify as evidence. So like I said, novel testable predictions. If I got novel testable predictions of God, that would cause me to believe in God. But you said you weren't sure what would convince you of that God does not exist.
Yeah.
Do you have a methodological answer? Like, if someone had novel testable predictions of a different God, a non-Christian God, or of some kind of the string theory that was confirmed or something, would that cause you to stop believing in God?
Um, well, the trouble with the other God is because I think about the Allah. If Allah is true, then I'm in trouble because that's a very different God than Yahweh, and there will be serious repercussions for me. So I have to think about that from time to time. But Allah runs into the same problem of what can you do with empirical evidence? It's really hard to argue with personal experiences because Muslims have personal experiences that can look very similar to Christian personal experiences, which is similar to Pastafarians. And the guy who looks at a lampstand and says that lampstand is going to change my life. So the religious, the other gods thing, um, I don't think that there's nothing that could happen to that I know of that would lead me towards one God versus this God. I think that this God has the best God or has the best evidence for him.
This God has the best
Um,
God.
yeah, yeah, this God is the best God, the only God. And like I said, everything points to him. I think the fact that he is an objective standard for morality explains it better than a field. And I do apologize if I don't understand what a field is, but then um, I don't know, the field's not God. It would have some form of limitation because it is physical. It is in physics, or it is in the physical universe, which God is outside of. Uh, so if there is a field doing that, again, that would have little sway over me if we figure out there's a field. Because just like if we figure out macroevolution is true, that doesn't disprove God. That just tells us what we thought about him was wrong.
All right, Scott Flatterty,
I'm
thank you for the super chat. Appreciate it. So, like, it seems. Do you think that the fact that you're not sure what could convince you that there's not a God is indicative that you have a very strong bias that makes it harder for you to assess things methodologically? Because I think that if you have a methodology that you think is a good way to believe things or not believe things, then you should trust in that methodology to both indicate and invalidate whatever you're believing. So, like, I think anything that can differentiate imagination from reality is a good method to trust. And if that method tells me there is a God, I'll believe there is a God. And if that method tells me there is no God, I'll believe there is no God. But it seems to me you're saying you don't have a methodology that you can present that can differentiate, or that you would trust to differentiate whether or not God existed or whether or not any other true thing would be about the world.
If you think of think of every human being as a test instrument, God's built us all in His image. We're the only ones who can read each test instrument um, empirically. We're the only ones who can actually see what that test instrument is reading. And so God has built each one of us with the full ability to have a relationship with Him. And so the trouble that I'm having, the reason I'm having trouble giving you something tangible that would sway my faith is because I have trusted God. God has proven to me that if you could prove to me that God's not trustworthy, then that would be one thing because I trust God and He has shown me time after time that I can trust Him. And that again goes to holding Him to His word, comparing Him against His own claims. So, yeah, I don't think that there's any empirical evidence that can disprove Him. And I know that I can trust what He's claiming. Um, so, yeah, I'm not sure if that satisfies your answer, but I think that's pretty honest.
All right. You mentioned teleology. Why would you think like the teleological argument would be indicative of a God? Because to me, I don't think it is.
Just because of how everything's created, how one thing is dependent on another thing, ecosystems and whatnot requiring one another, just the fine tuning of everything.
Could you be a little more specific? So, like, it seems to me the argument that most theists make is that, oh, look, it's so really improbable that all these things would align. Because it's
Yeah.
improbable, it must be designed, something like that.
Uh, yeah, because it's so improbable, it's far more reasonable, for sure.
Why would improbability indicate design over necessity or chance?
Well, chance doesn't do anything. and improbability is the opposite of a good chance. So improbability would mean there's not a good chance, so chance isn't going to do it.
So improbability just means it's a low chance, but it means there is necessarily a chance. So the improbability of getting a royal flush in poker or whatever is 1 in 50 something thousand, but it happens because it is possible. So
Sure,
if
reasonable.
if there's a low chance, that means it's possible to occur without design by definition.
Um, well, see, the trouble is if you stick all the matter in there, sure. I don't think there is any chance that anything can come from that something physical can come from nothing at all. So, being that God is outside of our created universe and He's our creator, He put it all there. So, if we wanted to say if He just stuck it all there and then over X amount of years with so many things happening, that's just how it formed. Well, okay, that's one thing. But to say that everything came from nothing doesn't work. I mean, that logically doesn't work.
Well, no one in physics thinks everything came from nothing. They always say it came from like a fundamental field that pre-existed the universe. So we agree that the universe came from something. Thank you for the super chat. The Dork Shop. If the Bible were untrustworthy, how would God tell us? And thank you, Matthew Lanza, for the super chat. Really appreciate it as always. If the Bible were untrustworthy, how would God tell us?
From my worldview, if the Bible was untrustworthy, God probably wouldn't exist. So, yeah.
Couldn't there be a different God than the Christian God?
Not in my worldview. No.
Okay.
He's the most trustworthy.
All right.
But that's why I'm saying I've tested that he's trustworthy. So that I did posit. If you could show me he's untrustworthy, that could be something that would be a stumbling block. And then he may end up having me trust him more by saying, well, here's the stumbling block. Look how I got you through it. Or it may go the other way. But yeah, his trustworthiness is a big thing. So if I can't trust the Bible, which which claims to be his word, which is, if I believe it means it is his word, then that causes all kinds of problems.
Gotcha. Doc Palermonaut, thank you for the super chat. Provide a scriptural basis for God is outside of time, because in the beginning definitionally is within time.
Well, in the beginning is when he starts creating things. That's when creation started. That doesn't mean it's when God started.
I think he's asking, like, is there any place in the Bible where it says God is outside of time?
I guess if you give me a second.
Sure.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, look at Jesus. Jesus claims to be God, and I didn't Google, or I didn't use any Bible resources to find that. Unfortunately, Google searching. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. You broke up a little bit, but I could hear you. You said you did not use searching.
Yes. So I didn't actually look for anything. Jesus claims to be God. And Jesus talks about how all things were created by him, for him. He was before all things. So obviously he can't be before himself. So I don't think he's lumping that himself into all things. That would tell me it's all created things. So yeah, Jesus claims to be God. Jesus was before all things. I think that in the beginning actually refers to the beginning of creation, not the beginning of God. So yeah, I will leave that as my answer.
All right. So going back to teleology, to me it seems like, so there's a really improbable event. It's really improbable that all the laws of physics would randomly co-align in this way. But there's multiple ways we can explain that. One is that a designer deliberately made it this way. Two is that there's a whole bunch of universes and they all have a bunch of different stats, and one of them just happens to be this way. So like if there's a million dice and each one of them landed on different sides, one of them is going to land on the magic side. And the third one is that there's an unknown law of physics where all the physics laws are interdetermined. So like we know, the grand unification theory says that all of the fundamental forces, gravity, the strong, weak electromagnetic forces, are all intertwined, and we demonstrated that the weak and electromagnetic forces are the same force. They join at high enough temperatures. So if all of the forces in physics are intertwined in that way, then if you change any one of them, all of them will change proportionally. And so the fact that we have a universe with these laws of physics is determined by the laws of physics, and you don't need a designer. The probability is one. So all three of those explain the fine tuning. I don't see why you would prefer design here.
I don't know if, well, I'll work backwards. So if we figure out that that is how the universe works, that just tells us how the creator has it working. It doesn't disprove the creator. I think you would agree that doesn't necessitate that God doesn't exist, right?
Well, the argument is that this phenomenon can be explained without God. Therefore, this phenomenon is not evidence of God. The goal isn't to disprove God. The question is the teleology evidence of God? And this argument is saying no, because it could be explained in other ways other than design.
Um, okay. Well, let's just go with that. So it doesn't have to be, lightning does not have to be evidence for God, though I would say if you trace it back, it traces back to God. Because we have to, something can't come from nothing, which takes us all the way back to origins. Anyway, um, lightning is, you cannot prove God just by lightning. There has to be philosophy and what yoked into it. You have to talk about it. You have to have a discussion about that. But understanding lightning understands how God designed lightning to work. He did not design Zeus to throw lightning bolts. He designed lightning to operate under different things happening, atoms and particles and whatnot, and charges. So if we come to understand that, well, this is how the whole universe works, that's not in any way discrediting God. In fact, that's just saying this is how God operates. And the more complex we find things to be, the harder it is to chalk it up to chance. So I'd actually say the more complex we find things to be, the more likely it is that it was designed, and the less likely it is it was by chance, because the chances are always getting lower. And that's
Sure.
a trend.
What about necessity? So necessity means that it can be determined by physical forces, not designed. So no designer. There's just a fundamental force of nature, and it caused everything to be this way because of necessity, and so there is no design.
I guess so that is a claim that there is no design. So I guess good luck proving that.
Well, how do you prove design? Because if it can explain everything that design could explain, then it has all the same evidence of design.
Well, it doesn't explain the origins. I mean, again, it can explain how things are operating, but if it's in the universe, it can't explain how the universe, like if it's in the universe, it can't explain how it inside the universe came into being.
Well, it technically does explain that, but that's the cosmological argument. So just like in the teleological argument, the point of the argument is that it's more plausible that God explains this phenomenon than other phenomenon. Than other sources. But if other sources can explain the phenomenon, then the teleological argument is false. Because the teleological argument is saying that this phenomenon, that all of the laws of physics are combined in this way, is more evidence for design than for the other hypothesis. But if that's wrong, right, and the other hypothesis can explain it equally as well, then the teleological argument is false. Even if you bring up the cosmological argument, that's just a separate argument. So it seems like if this phenomenon of the constants of nature can be explained by an unknown natural law that intertwines all of the physics together, and that explains the fine-tuning, well, then the teleological argument has been proven false, because it doesn't indicate design anymore, because now we have a natural explanation. And this is independent of the origins.
That doesn't work, because if it's an unexplained natural law, it's still a natural law, which means it's inside of the creation, which means God's outside of it. He put it into motion. Like that'd be like saying, because we don't understand how magnets work, like and then we figure out how magnets work, well, now that disproves God. No, it just tells us we understand that. Or if we don't understand how a various law of thermodynamics works, well, then we figure it out. Well, that doesn't disprove God. That just means now we understand how the laws of his creation operate.
I don't think that works as an explanation, because we could just say the same thing and say, Oh, well, actually, it's just explaining how the law of physics designed everything because the law of physics was necessary and was uncreated. So I don't think simply asserting your conclusion is evidence of your conclusion.
It's necessary for, it's necessary, the laws of physics are necessary for our universe to operate how it operates, but it's not necessary by its own existence. I mean, who says that a law of physics is necessary to exist? It's necessary for us to operate, but who says it's necessary to exist?
Thank you for the super chat pseudonym. If lightning is not caused by the flying spaghetti monster, does that disprove the monster's ontology and not an argument against God, or he is natural?
I'm not sure I follow that.
If lightning is not caused by the flying spaghetti monster, does that disprove the flying spaghetti monster exists?
No. If it's not caused by the flying spaghetti monster, no, it doesn't disprove. It's like a pheasant doesn't cause lightning, but that doesn't disprove a pheasant's existence. I'm not sure what the power behind that argument is.
Not exactly sure either. But anyway, so to me, it seems like what you're doing is you're saying that because I assume God created everything, then I assume that the fine tuning must be caused by a God. But I can just assume something not God created everything, something that's not God created everything, and so I can assume the fine tuning is explained by the not God thing.
Yeah, but then you have to test it against its claims. I'm not assuming, I'm going based off of what God says, and God has proven himself to be true.
Okay, so if you didn't, suppose you didn't have the opportunity to test God's words, then would it be equal evidence for both?
I guess empirically. However, again, from my worldview, God, outside of testing and evidence, has the full ability to change hearts and to reach people. So God could have me believe in him even though I don't want to. I mean, I could be working against him and he could change my heart.
Right, but we're not asking about psychological state, which we're asking about epistemic, like what is does the evidence indicate state. So like if you were not able to confirm God through your feelings, through your peacefulness feelings, would this argument on its own be evidence for God's? Like, would the teleological argument be evidence independent? Like, if you never got to sense God, would this argument still be evidence?
You know, it's not just feelings. Like if you take Proverbs, it talks about physical rewards that come from good conduct. And people who aren't Christians can do good conduct and get those physical, financial, other rewards. So God doesn't just ask you to test things yourself that are just feeling based. You can test things yourself, such as if I act in a certain way, will it lead down a certain direction? And the only reason I say that is because you keep talking about this peace that I have, and I brought peace up, but that's not the only thing that God claims. There are so many things that he claims. It'd be so easy to just say, okay, God, I trust you, genuinely trust him, put him to the test, and see where it goes.
Okay, but that's slightly a different topic. So my question
It
is
is. Yes, I'm sorry.
if God never was able to confirm anything in the Bible, would the
Yeah.
teleological argument still be evidence, or would it no longer be evidence?
Um, would the, well, I think yeah, I think it would still be evidence because it points to creator. Creation points to creator because of the lack of odds of it happening without one.
Okay, so why do you think it's unlikely that the universe would come about without a creator? Because it seems like it could come about from laws of physics just fine.
Well, it'd be very unlikely. It'd be very
Why?
unlikely that we would get this result.
Why do you think that? It could be the likelihood could be 100%. There could be 100% chance that the laws of physics would produce this universe exactly as it is.
Yeah, but we can do the math on amino acids. We can do the math on what the odds of an atom on this side of the universe being next to any other atom in the universe is. And so it's incredible odds all of the time that are taking place right there because of how many atoms are in the universe. But at the same time, there's that many more things that aren't happening because all the other atoms aren't next to it.
Right. That's if there aren't physical laws that are forcing them to be there. Because if there are physical laws forcing them to be there, then the chance is 100%. So why do you think like every particle in the universe could be determined to be exactly where it is with 100% determined forces? So there's no
Sure.
chances.
What does determined mean?
Forced to be there. There's no percent. It has 100% chance it has to be there. Determined means it's
What's forcing it to be there?
other laws of physics.
What's forcing them to be there?
Their nature. Their nature is necessarily that way.
Why is it that way?
Because it's necessary.
Why is it necessary?
Because it's their nature.
Right. And so that gets into a circle of, well, because that's just what we're assuming based off what we see. That would be like me saying, well, why is God good? Because he's good. Well, what is good? Good is God's nature. And then it goes back and forth. It's like, well, yeah, that explains why God's nature is that way.
Yes. So either one of us can use circular reasoning to say it's necessary because it's necessary, but that means that neither one of us has any more evidence than the other.
Well, that works for a standard for objective morality, but I don't think that works for an explanation for the physical universe.
How is it different if I say that the universe's laws are necessary because they're necessary? How is that different from you saying God's nature is necessary because it's necessary?
Well, God never came into being, and that's logically consistent with who God claims to be. We have no good explanation for how the universe came into being without anything causing it to come into being.
Right. So I'm saying something did cause it to come into being, and it was a necessary law of physics that predated the universe, that was uncreated.
Right. What was the thing? What was that thing?
Quantum field?
Okay. So do we have evidence for the quantum field that you're positing?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So where did the quantum field come from?
It was not created. It's eternal. It's never been created.
Right. Well, I mean, this goes back to I would love to argue that, but that's outside of my realm. There.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So let me change the question a bit. Who fine-tuned God?
Nobody. He's perfect. You can't fine tune something that's perfect.
Okay, so I can say the quantum field is perfect and it's not finely tuned. Why would you show that one is more likely than the other?
Because a quantum field is something in nature. God's outside of nature. So the quantum field is something that's dependent on being in this universe.
No, quantum fields are outside of this universe, but that's a different topic. So like, is God in reality?
Yeah.
Okay, so just like God is in reality, the quantum field is in reality. They're both outside of the universe, but they're both in reality.
I am arguing I'm kind of shooting in the dark here because I do not have the knowledge I don't think I have the knowledge to keep track with the conversation about the quantum field because I don't.
Okay.
So I don't want to waste time or make myself look worse than I've made myself look by arguing against it because I don't know what it is.
All right.
Like I don't understand it.
That's fair enough. Fair enough.
Yep.
Let's talk about evolution a bit because we haven't talked about that. Like, why do you think? Like, I assume you don't think there's macroevolution, but you accept microevolution or something like that.
Sure, if that's the way you want to divvy it up. I don't accept macroevolution because, again, it just goes back to odds. The odds of amino acid chains assembling. We find that cells and what is it? The ribosome's ability to operate with certain amounts of amino acids taken out of it. They're robust systems that can keep operating for a while, but the problem is then they have to be, it's not how does a system that's already there, how robust is it in its operation, but how did it get there and how did it get so robust? And so again, the odds of amino acid chains building to anything that's anatomic, but go back to, I mean, abiogenesis is separate, that's even less likely. But then you take the unlikelihood of amino acid chains actually working out properly, the odds are incredibly low.
So what do you mean by working out probably? Because I understand all life is just a combination of those amino acid chains, DNA,
Yeah.
and
Hmm.
from one chain to change to a different chain seems pretty easy because we know of there's like in a 10-hour period, bacteria will accumulate 10,000 different mutations. Their DNA will randomly change in 10,000 different ways. So it seems like it's pretty easy for one genetic code to change into a different one of a different species because they're all just a bunch of combinations of amino acid chains, right? So why would it be impossible for one to change into a different one?
I So with abiogenesis, I use the word impossible because I believe it's impossible. With this, I say unreasonably unlikely. And again, that just goes back to Oz because let's take bacteria with a reproduction rate of like I forget. I When I did my debate on evolution with Reason to Doubt and Erica, I built a model for it. Even if you had the number of bacteria in the world that we have today, with a reproduction rate of 0.003, however that works, even with five uh, quindecillion, I think it would still take 17 trillion years for 100 amino acids to properly align for a mutation that actually builds into something new. So if we're just using existing stuff, that's fine. But for new working mutations to take place, that's how unlikely it is.
But it would happen if you had enough time, right?
Well, sure, yeah, if you had enough time, but there's no model out there that has more than 17 trillion years.
Well, so I'm just saying that without a god, it would be just fine for nature on its own if you had enough time to create a diversity of life like we see. We just need a lot more time than what we have.
Uh, well, no, because I'm presupposing God. So I don't actually think that nature could exist without God. Um,
Well, all I'm
but
saying is just
that point being said, if if macroevolution is true, well, then that means we're wrong about some things. It means we're wrong about the age of the Earth. It means we're wrong about the age of the universe, and it means we're wrong about um, whether or not things can actually have something that complex take place. But just because we're wrong about something doesn't mean it disproves the creator. It says we didn't understand the creator.
all I'm asking right now is it possible, given what we know about evolution, microevolution, that macroevolution would happen without a god? Like, let's say God created abiogenesis, happened already. But
Mm-hmm.
the way what we know about evolution is that macroevolution would occur without God if you had enough time. It would occur.
Uh, what is enough time? And based on the odds, no.
Enough time could be trillions of years, whatever number you want to put in there.
I If there's enough time, there's enough time, so sure. But based on what we know and based on the odds, no. I think that's the best answer I can give you.
Okay, so as long as you're admitting that it is possible that microevolution can lead to macroevolution given enough time, that's all I'm interested in. If that's possible, that's good enough for me. Um, Thank you for the super chat, Doc Palermo. Have you calculated the diversity of new species growth required with the flood as the starting point?
No, I haven't. I try not to debate the flood because again, I'm not confident in the age of the Earth, and that's just not a topic that I care to put my egg. That's not a basket I care to put my eggs into. So I trust that it happened. I don't know how old the Earth is, so I don't know how all that works. Um, but yeah, no, I haven't calculated that.
Okay, so why do you think that it would take that long? Because to me, it seems like it would take a lot less time in order to get that much evolution. Why would you think it would take trillions of years?
Um, based on the amount, so there's what 21 amino acids. Based on how many amino acids there are, and then the odds of them properly aligning themselves in a chain that actually does something that is beneficial. But then not only that, not only does it have to be beneficial, it has to be beneficial and stick. And then there has to be something else that, well, I guess on the bacteria level, because they reproduce themselves. Uh, but there comes a point where different things are going to have to start having those at the same time. But I didn't even equate that into the equation, so I don't even know why I'm going there. But I don't know if I answered your question clearly. Let me do nothing. Uh, Back to you.
All right, yes. So, it seems like in order to know the probability of how unlikely a beneficial mutation would be, you'd have to know all possible combinations that would lead to a beneficial mutation. And I don't think you do. I don't think anybody does.
Yeah, it's a lot.
So then it doesn't seem like you could use that as a calculation in your stats because you don't know what it is.
I will have to. I built it out and forgot most of it because I built the calculator for that argument. So I could either rewatch the video or go pull up my calculator that I built. But I had a reason for why I came to that number. I'd have to reinvestigate everything I plugged into that. But I do know that the odds were reasonably. I calculated it in favor of better odds of evolution. So things actually should look worse than the number that I gave. I simplified things
So
because
go ahead.
I argue a lot of things from a layman's perspective. I'm not a microbiologist. I'm not a I don't, all I can do is take the knowledge that I can get and build something out of that.
So why do you think that all the experts in the field have different numbers that are much more likely than, like, that evolution is much more likely than what you say?
I think there are. I don't know if they do. I'm not sure. I'd have to see exactly what the expert consensus is and make sure that it's actually consistent. And then I have to see if there are any that are going against those statistics. Because my goal wasn't to argue for or against authority. My goal was to build something that I could show that was just right there. So I don't know. Maybe I'm ignorant to something that could change the whole situation.
Yeah, I'd like to see what your criticisms are of the academic models and their probabilities of evolution, because that seems to be, I think they're pretty reliable and they seem to accurately predict things, especially in bacteria groups, of how long it will take to gain function, and they seem to get it right at a high rate of success. So they seem those to have very trustworthy models.
Well, what does it mean to gain function, though? What do they mean by that?
It can survive in I forget the word for it, a thing that kills them.
Well, sure, but if none of the bacteria can survive in that, they all die. If something can survive in that, then obviously there was something in that bacteria that existed that worked out. So that one can now reproduce. So
Well, yeah,
that's an
that's
argument.
what they're saying, is that if they have in this amount of time, the bacteria will have a variation that can survive in this material that none of them can currently survive in.
Right, but oh well, I don't know how that works. I don't wouldn't think that they could predict that off of a completely random change. That they obviously they have the ability to predict it, so they're going off of something that is there. Uh,
Yes, so that's one of the big contentions with in biology. They're saying evolution isn't random. That's just a mischaracterization that creationists use. It's not perfectly random. There is actually a driving force there, which is like the natural selection thingy, and so it won't be random. It will be guided.
well, I don't know. I think we could argue about what random and chance and guided per se mean, because unless there's something in the DNA telling it, hey, you need to change in this way, then it is the environment conditioning it, which means it is a product of chance.
All right, the random mutation is random, but then the ones that survive and reproduce isn't random. That's determined by the environment. So the environment will
Yeah.
selectively help some of them do better than other ones, and those ones will be more reproductive, have more reproductive success, and so the genes will continue to mutate in that way more successfully than the other ways.
Yeah. I know that you can turn genes on and off. I don't know exactly how um, mutations I know can make it so that something can stop having the ability to turn something on and off. I don't know if mutations give something a brand new ability. So I'm not sure that you would get. I think you can get. I don't know if that counts as morphological. A functional change within something that already exists seems fully reasonable because it already exists, and of course you can manipulate a code that is already there. But to get a new anatomic structure requires multiple systems all evolving at the same time. Um,
Wait,
like
what do you mean
the
multiple systems? Because to me, the only thing that's changing is the ATCG. So all the only thing that needs to change at the same time is the correct pattern of ATCG. You don't need multiple patterns evolving at the same
well
time.
take well no take for example. Well, I mean, now we get into the bigger scale. We're not just down at the amino acid level. We're at the actual function of something being like feasibly surviving. So take the eye, for example, and I don't know if it's Richard Dawkins or whatnot, but the someone posited the idea that the eye started off just as like a photo detector. It was flat, started to
Darwin,
cup. Oh, was that Darwin? Okay.
it's in his
Um,
book, The Origin of Species.
got it. Uh, I've been interested to read that book, but I've not read that book because I'm a slow reader. But anyways, so how that would happen is there would come a point where in that in assuming that's how it happened, that eye closes off. If that eye, when it closes off, does not have a pumping system to keep things circulating and fresh, things are going to start decaying and rotting because that's how any isolated system of water works.
Wait, say that again.
So if the eye closes around water or liquid because it's in water, unless it has a system for pumping or for cleaning that, and it's the right thing used for cleaning or filling the eye, then the system's going to start to rot and decay as soon as it closes off because that's how it works.
Wait, I don't follow that. So just water doesn't automatically cause things to decay.
If if you just put something organic in stagnant water, or you just put stagnant water in something organic, and it just sits there, it'll break it down.
No, it doesn't.
Unless you have a system that can take fish. If you take all the oil off of a fish, it's not good for the fish, right?
Because of the bacteria in the water. But if you have water that doesn't have any of the bacteria, it's fine. It doesn't do anything.
Well, I'd have to look into that then. Um, hmm.
Like water doesn't
I don't know.
inherently like
I
water
don't.
is just hydrogen and oxygen atoms. The hydrogen and oxygen atoms don't bind
Well,
with
right,
like
but
anything in the cell to cause it to like break.
well, water binds. Water's cohesive. Water binds with everything. Water naturally breaks things down.
No.
Yeah.
If it's not moving and because it doesn't automatically bind with things, it doesn't like rip,
Well,
it doesn't bind enough to cause a breakdown of the connection of the particles in skin cells. It does not do that. What it does do is it allows the bacteria to hit the skin cells, which then breaks it down.
oh,
Like if you put a rock in water, the rock's not going to decay just because it's water unless the water's moving over it.
sure. Oh, maybe. Um, I don't know. I'd have to look more into that. I do know that water does break things down in the sense that it pulls things into it. If you, for example, if you drink pure water, uh, just what is it, deionized water?
Well,
Um,
deionized has like an extra or less of an hydrogen atom or something, which is toxic. But just pure H2O with no, um, what's it, particles in it, I think is fine.
if you drink that, the next day your mouth is going to feel like it's burning because it pulled literally everything out of your tongue and the rest of your mouth because it pulled everything out of there. Um, but if you leave, here's this will be my theory, and if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But if you leave water in or next to an organic system that is not designed to repel that water, the water is going to break it down because organic systems are water based.
So I just looked it up. Like pure water doesn't damage anything. Like if you take away one of the hydrogen atoms, it damages things, or add one, it damages things. But pure water doesn't damage anything.
Hmm. I'd have to look more into that because I did water treatment, and one of the systems, reverse osmosis systems, if they get the water too clean, it can actually start pulling things out of your body that your body needs. And so oftentimes you'll put a post filter in there to not only get rid of any stagnant taste that's in the sitting tank, but it can also stabilize it or add something to it so that way it's actually not pooling uh, salts and everything else out of your body. And I think that's the trouble with distilled water. In fact, I work with a piece of calibration equipment that if you put distilled water into it, it will destroy the steam system. You cannot use distilled water.
Eric Waters, thank you for the super chat. Water binds with everything. Have you ever showered? So that's not binding. Sticking is not binding. Not the same thing. But so it seems here, like from what I'm reading, purified water kills you because you actually need the other minerals. And so if you only drink pure purified water, you don't get the other minerals, and that could definitely make you deficient in like calcium and stuff. But it doesn't seem nothing about also, taking stuff out.
I think it'll also pull things. It'll pull things out of organic structures. It'll pull all the minerals and whatnot you need out of the cell. It will suck it out of there.
I don't see that. I don't see any information on that. It can take away carbon dioxide from the air, but doesn't seem to doesn't affect cells at all. Mineral deficiencies happen because you don't get anything from the water and you need the stuff from the water, but I don't see anything else.
Yeah, I would be curious though.
So yeah, I don't think it follows that just having encapsulated water would cause decay unless the water's moving, then it would cause decay, or it is infected with bacteria, which would cause decay.
Well, that could be true too. So are we saying that the eye formed in a environment that was free of bacteria that would damage it, eat it, harm it?
Yeah, I don't see a problem with that. Because obviously if there was bacteria that ate literally everything, nothing would have formed. So I don't see a problem with saying things formed that bacteria didn't eat, because obviously it must have.
Well, that's assuming that that's what happened. Assuming evolution is true, yeah, that's what must have happened.
Well, no, even if evolution isn't true and things come from only their kinds or whatever, clearly, like in the womb or whatever, if there was bacteria that would eat the fetus, then clearly there would be no baby. So clearly there can be a bottled up segment of water where there isn't bacteria that eats the fetus. So I don't see a problem with that. Like,
well, but
the uterus is full of water.
You've got an immune system and white blood cells.
Yes, but there's still bacteria there.
Well, sure, but the immune system protects you from certain types of bacteria, and well, I guess not viruses, because viruses can infect and kill that, but that's the whole point of the immune system. So that's what I'm saying. If the eye doesn't have an immune system and there's any bacteria that can harm it, it's cooked.
Right, but like
that's eggs, not originally what I was saying, but I dropped the earlier point.
But like eggs don't necessarily have an immune system, or plants don't. They're in water. Like there are lots of things in water that don't decay.
I mean, eggs is a great example because eggs are formed inside the chicken. They are laid, and then they have a film that protects them. If you wash an egg and don't immediately put it in the refrigerator, you've taken that protective film off, and in a much quicker amount of time, it will rot because it's much easier for things to get through it.
Yeah, but it could just also be like if you wash it off and put it in a sterile environment, it's going to be fine. So there's different environments where the bacteria, like not all bacteria are everywhere in the world. So if you have an egg in a certain location, it will be able to survive just fine because the bacteria that could kill it isn't there. So like it doesn't seem reasonable to me to think that all damaging bacteria are everywhere at all times and that something couldn't have formed.
So I guess a good way to test that was find a place in the world where you can wash an egg and it not rot faster than if you didn't wash it.
I'm
That'd be a
sure
great
those
experiment, and then
I'm sure those
perhaps the
exist.
eye happened there. Yeah.
Like the what's it, the salt flats probably would be a big example where that probably would be the case, or the Dead Sea probably would be the case. Places where there's lots of some kind of something that cleanses the
You know,
bacteria.
I would things survive, organisms survive where you wouldn't expect them to. So I don't even know if I'd wager that, but um, yes, that's a great test. Give that a shot.
But yeah, it definitely seems to me the case that there isn't a problem where certain organisms can form where bacteria aren't killing them, because I think that's like I don't think there's always going to be killing bacteria everywhere that kills everything.
I don't think you could find a place where it isn't because
Well,
it is
today for
everywhere.
sure.
I mean, well, sure, but then yeah, but that means then you have to assume into the model that there's places that it wasn't, even though today we see that it is.
Well, yeah, I don't
Like,
think as an evolutionist, I don't think all bacteria have always existed at all times. I don't think it's universal in that sense. I always think there's some that eat some other ones, but I don't think all bacteria eat everything always. So I definitely think
yeah,
there's going to
but
be
do you see
areas.
how that logic is circular and doesn't work in a way? Because if you say those bacteria must not have existed because I don't think they had to, and obviously evolution worked. Well, for me, it seems far more reasonable that some kind of bacteria would have existed that would have harmed it because bacteria eats stuff. It's what it does. And so it seems more reasonable that something would have prevented that eye from closing, having no pumping systems, having no cleaning systems, and there was absolutely nothing there to rot that structure before it had any sected.
I'm not understanding because, but in fact, that some bacteria will affect everything equally. So there should have been some locations where some things could form a certain structure that some the bacteria there wouldn't have eaten it.
Well, did you, maybe I misheard you, did you or did you not grant that there's probably nowhere in the world today that you could do that egg experiment? Well, I guess you said the salt flats.
Yeah, there's probably some places in the world the wrong kind of bacteria to get through the shell exist. Yes, and they're killed off by whatever to cater to that kind of material.
Yeah, I think operating off of a what if may not get us very far with this. So uh, we may have exhausted that.
Overall, would you like to give a closing statement and where people can find you for like sir, your YouTube channel or whatever?
I don't have any links to any YouTube channel. I really appreciate the time. It was an honor to be on. I watched some of your material. I've really appreciated your debates. And I like, um, at times you're a contrarian. At times you're, a free thinker and you just tell people what's going on, even if it disagrees with whatever you're saying or whatever they're saying. So I really appreciate the work you're doing. Just to respond. So you don't have to believe that, but I would encourage you to investigate it.
Awesome, thanks again. Thanks again for coming on.